Chapter 737, 21st of September, White Stone City. Rainin, the orange sun rose from the mountains in the east and slowly climbed up the mountain, passing over the highest peak. It shone brightly on White Stone City, dyeing the green ancient city with a layer of golden light. Ruan Ping and the other lords stood on the tower of the south gate, watching the allied army slowly walk out from the east, west, and west gates. Their expressions were solemn, their faces shining with sincerity. If Shanghai City doesn't allow us to have a tomorrow, then we will kill our way to a tomorrow, Ruan Ping said. The three armies were like three giant dragons, converging on the plains outside the south gate, slowly forming a huge battle formation. The grass outside the city was instantly flattened by the army, without a trace of color. Even so, there were still troops waiting to gather in the city. The vast plains outside the city could not accommodate all the allied army. At the front of the formation was the 6,000-strong army of Huadong County. The lord of Huadong County had been tortured to death last night, but his army had stayed behind. Because they did not obtain any useful information, Ruan Ping and the rest knew they were in the wrong, but they did not dare to keep the army of Huadong County by their side. The best way was to push them to the front line. The 6,000-strong army of Huadong County was the best suicide squad. For this, Ruan Ping and the rest had arranged as many as 10,000 people to supervise them. If the army of Huadong County made any strange movements, they would be shot into hedgehogs. Fanlihua Army's encampment. The abnormality of White Stone City had the Fanlihua Army on high alert. Late last night, Fanlihua had already received a message from the spies in White Stone City, knowing that Number 32 had successfully destroyed the enemy's teleportation formation. Fanlihua heaved a sigh of relief, but she was also shocked. She knew very well that tomorrow would be the most difficult day for the Fanlihua army. The 10,000 Years Army, the Evil Coming Army, and the Sun Bin Army had already received orders and were rushing to White Stone City. The nearest 10,000 Years Army would need to wait until tomorrow afternoon at the earliest to reach the battlefield. The furthest Sun Bin Army would need to wait until the afternoon of the 22nd. Whether or not they could resist the desperate struggle of the 250,000 Allied army and hold on for this most crucial day would be the biggest and most crucial parade since the formation of the Fanlihua army. Furthermore, it was a battle for Fanlihua's reputation. Fanlihua had to prove to the vast army of Shanghai City that she was worthy of Junshang's high regard and trust. Pass down my orders. All divisions are to hold their positions and follow the defensive plan we've drawn up earlier. Make sure to maximize the effectiveness of every fortification. Whoever loses their position will be punished by military law. Fanlihua's expression was stern. Yes, sir. The camp, which had been repaired overnight, was like a vicious beast waiting for its enemies to take the bait. At the last military conference last night, Fanlihua had already said, "If the enemy is allowed to pass through the Third Army's defensive line and successfully break through, I will take the blame and resign. But before I resign, I will not hesitate to remove the hats of all the division commanders and brigade marshals." Fanlihua's light gaze swept over without a trace of killing intent, but it made all the men in the tent feel a chill, their hair standing on end. One of the regiment commanders recalled the incident and described the scene very accurately. After being swept by the general, the boiling blood in my body instantly cooled down, and I felt a chill run through my heart. It felt like an invisible sword energy was pressed against our necks, and if we made the slightest mistake, our heads would fall to the ground. At that time, we were thinking that even if we died on the defensive line, we couldn't lose our position. Fanlihua's power in the Third Army was evident. The war horn officially sounded. The 250,000 Allied troops formed a battle formation and pounced towards the enemy's camp with the beat of the drums. Before they even got close, they could feel an invincible aura that could crush everything. The tent on the other side was silent, without a trace of noise. The silence was somewhat frightening. Inside the camp, all the soldiers held their breaths, ready to reap the lives of the enemy at any time. As soon as the Allied troops entered the firing range, a sky full of arrows rained down. The dense black rain of arrows was innumerable, layer upon layer, forming a steel torrent. Like a black curtain, it suddenly fell from the sky and set off a monstrous massacre in the Allied troops' position. Wherever the rain of arrows passed, there was not a single survivor. Corpses littered the ground. Instant kill. Because the rain of arrows was too dense, there was no way for the soldiers to dodge. The blade and shield soldiers were still fine. They had shields to protect them, and if they were lucky, they could escape. The archers, on the other hand, died under the rain of arrows before they could even retaliate. Huadong County's 6,000 soldiers were instantly wiped out. Charge. The Allied commander was not afraid of death, and commanded the army to charge forward. Because they were attacking a camp, the Allied cavalry could not play a role, and they were all deployed to the two sides as guards. The real main force of the siege was the 100,000 blade and shield soldiers. They braved the rain of arrows and launched their strongest charge. The vast army was like a black tide, instantly drowning the camp. After paying a heavy price, countless sword and shield soldiers stepped on the simple siege ladders and climbed up the wooden walls of the tents one after another, starting a fierce battle with the Fanlihua army that was stationed here. As soon as the battle began, both sides entered the most intense and cruel close combat. A camp was, after all, just a camp. No matter how well prepared the Fanlihua army was, it was impossible for them to bring fierce fire oil, rocks, logs, cannons, and other common defensive supplies. At most, they had placed a large number of ballistae on the wooden walls. Below the wooden walls, there were hundreds of catapults. Be it the ballistae or the catapults, they were originally prepared by the Third Army for siege, but now they were being used for defense. One could imagine the damage they caused to the Allied army. On the battlefield, waves after waves of Allied soldiers fearlessly charged up the wooden walls, but they were beaten back by the Third Army. The corpses of the dead soldiers were like rain, falling continuously at the foot of the wooden walls. In the blink of an eye, there was a pile of corpses at the foot of the wooden walls. And behind the attacking soldiers, the rain of arrows and catapults continued to cause damage. Because the Allied army was too densely packed, the fireballs thrown by the catapults were able to cause a wave in the army formation. Usually, a single fireball could kill a large group. An entire hour passed, and the camp was still as stable as Mount Tai, but more than 20,000 Allied soldiers were completely buried here. The brutality of the battle was beyond everyone's imagination. Stationed on the wooden walls was the Third Army's 1st Division, formerly known as the Liuzhou County Guard Division, the fiercest among the major guard divisions. In the Battle of Zhaoqing, the Liuzhou County Guard Division had shown its skills, and even the god of slaughter, Bai Qi, had praised it. After being integrated into the Third Army, the division had undergone another transformation, becoming even more ferocious, and could be considered a flag of the Third Army. It was precisely because of this that Fanlihua handed the most difficult task to the First Army. The current performance of the battle showed that the First Army lived up to its illustrious reputation. Losing the first battle made the Allied army stifle a sigh of relief. Thinking of the armies of the lords watching the battle silently from the city tower, the general did not dare to be negligent. Pass down the order, have the assault brigade go up. The Allied commander was ready to use the most elite assault troops to attack. Yes, sir. A total of 3 assault brigades received the order and immediately went up to meet them. Like a trident, they instantly pierced into the heart of the wooden wall. The extraordinariness of the assault brigade was soon reflected. This was a group of opponents who were on par with the 1st Division, and with the cooperation of countless Allied forces, they were able to suppress the 1st Division, which had already suffered heavy casualties. The opportunity to break through the first line of defense was right in front of them. Good, continue to press forward. The Allied commander was excited, and the army was sent to the front line as if it was free. This made things even more difficult for the First Army. Once they passed a certain critical point, the casualties of the First Army would immediately skyrocket. In a tower in the inner circle of tents, "General, let the First Army withdraw, they can't hold on any longer," the adjutant reminded Fanlihua. Fanlihua glanced at the hourglass in front of her, her expression determined. "Wait a little longer." The time that the first line of defense could hold on was still half an hour away from Fanlihua's expectations. "General, the First Army has been defeated, leave some seeds for them. Even if all of them are destroyed, they have to hold on." Fanlihua was unmoved. It was not that she was hardened, but she was carrying the entire army on her shoulders, and even the key to the victory of the entire Lingnan War. She could not afford to be soft-hearted. The First Army must hold on. The wooden wall. The killing continued, and people were falling at every moment. With their tenacious willpower and well-trained daily, the First Army managed to hold on under the attack of the Allied Assault Brigade, although they were on the verge of collapse. However, this kind of perseverance could not last for long. The key to the victory of the war ultimately depended on the difference in military strength between the two sides. It was not something that could be completely reversed by relying on morale alone. Up until now, almost every soldier in the 1st Division had been wounded. "Boss, the general wants us to hold on for another half an hour." The messenger ran over. The division commander, Zhao Yan, was also covered in blood. Upon receiving the military order, he grinned, looked around at his comrades, and said, "Brothers, did you hear that? The general is not very satisfied with us. Damn it, even if we die, we must not let down the prestige of the First Army. Don't you think so? Come on, boss, that's your prestige. Are you afraid of not completing the mission and going back to be punished by the general?" Haha, the surrounding brigade commanders did not buy it and did not give face to Zhao Yan. F***ck off. Zhao Yan also knew the character of his general and said, "Let's not waste any more time. Isn't it just risking our lives? We are not afraid of that. We cannot let the bastards of the other divisions laugh at us, and we cannot let the enemy be complacent. If we really can't hold on for half an hour, I will accompany you to death." "Boss, you are not a beauty, we don't need you to accompany us." F***ck off, F***ck off. Zhao Yan kicked them, raised his sword, and charged forward. This time, they were really risking their lives. Chapter 738. Zhao Yan had fulfilled his promise. The 1st Division had held on for the most difficult half an hour, but the price they paid was that less than 2,000 people of the entire division had successfully retreated. The remaining 10,000 or so of the best soldiers had all died on the spot. The division commander, Zhao Yan, was seriously injured and unconscious. He was protected by his personal guards from the battlefield and luckily survived. With the retreat of the 1st Division, the first line of defense of the camp was officially broken. The price the Allied forces had paid was the loss of more than 40,000 soldiers. The wooden wall was piled with corpses, making it difficult to pass through. The blood directly dyed the wooden wall bright red. The Allied commander breathed a sigh of relief after taking down the wooden wall. Logically speaking, when a camp's wooden wall fell, it basically lost its defensive ability. In the following close combat, the Allies had an absolute advantage in terms of military strength. The Allied commander was confident that they could take down the camp within a day. Who would have thought that after crossing the wooden wall, they would see such a scene? They saw that about 100 meters away from the first wooden wall, a second wooden wall had been erected. In the open space between the two walls there was a 1.5-meter deep trench every 5 meters. Between the trenches there were also tunnels that connected the trenches vertically, forming a complete defensive system. Barricades, arrow towers, and other fortifications were dotted like stars in the sky. At each key point, there were 3 bows and 8 bulls ballistae or catapult. What was even more terrifying was that there were thousands of archers hidden in the trenches. This was the second line of defense of the camp, jointly guarded by the 3rd Division and the 2nd Division of the 3rd Division. Due to the limited time to build the camp, Fanlihua's design for the camp wasn't the usual square, but a long and narrow strip along the east and west. The entire camp basically blocked the Allied army's way south. The Allied army couldn't break through even if they wanted to. They had to completely uproot the camp before they could pass. For this reason, Fanlihua only deployed a large number of troops at the front, and at the same time arranged for the 5th Division to be responsible for covering the 2 flanks. The 4th Division was responsible for guarding the 2nd wooden wall, which was also the last line of defense of the camp. There wasn't even enough time to erect a complete wooden wall at the back of the camp. Such an arrangement could be said to have utilized the resources to the extreme, achieving the optimal deployment of troops. The 3 lines of defense were interlinked, advancing layer by layer, forming a huge chain formation. One of the reasons why famous generals were famous was because of this. Whether it was marching arrangements, logistical calculations, or setting up camps, they were all proficient in all of them. Of course, the scientific organization of Shanghai City's army also played a big role. It was precisely because every division was equipped with a specialized engineering unit that they were able to build such a stronghold so quickly. This was a huge problem for the Alliance. "General, what should we do?" the adjutant asked. The Allied commander's face darkened, and he said in a deep voice, "What else can we do? Let's attack." After a short rest, the Allied forces launched their second wave of attack. Since the beginning of the battle, the attacks had not been going well. The vast army crossed the wooden wall and entered the open space, engaging in close combat with the sword and shield soldiers guarding the area. At the same time, they had to withstand the surprise attacks from the archers in the trenches. With the cover of the trenches, the crossbowmen were merciless meat reapers. Each of them turned into a sharpshooter and shot accurately at the enemies on the battlefield. From time to time, there would be arrow towers and ballistae providing cover. Therefore, it was extremely difficult for the Allied forces to advance. Almost every trench was built with human lives. What was even more speechless was that sometimes a trench that had been taken with great difficulty would be taken back by the enemy in the blink of an eye. At one time, the 2 armies went back and forth around the trenches 4 times. On the 2nd wooden wall, Fanlihua looked down from above. From time to time, she would flexibly mobilize the army according to the rhythm of the battlefield. She would command the crossbowmen in the trenches to concentrate their firepower and annihilate the toughest enemy. The secret of Fanlihua's command was in the 5 colored flags. Every trench in the defensive area had been divided into 3 sections in advance: east, west, and west. Therefore, each section had a specific area number. Through different combinations of flags, Fanlihua could convey different military orders. She could even do some of the more complicated military orders, such as commanding the crossbowmen in the middle of the 2nd trench to support the west. There were special messengers in the trenches who would timely change the target of attack according to the command of the colored flags. In this way, the entire command was like a beautiful concert. Every note was a sharp killing weapon. Every melody was a ghost song that took away lives. Although the music was beautiful, the scene was extremely cruel. Under this formation, the vast Allied army became restricted and could not display their advantage in terms of military strength. Close to 100,000 cavalrymen became like decorations and did nothing. Until noon, the 2nd line of defense was still as stable as a rock. The terrifying thing was that another 20,000 Allied soldiers had been completely buried here. In just one morning, a fifth of the 250,000 Allied soldiers had been wiped out. More than 70% of them had died in the hands of the crossbowmen. According to incomplete statistics, in just one morning, the 3rd Legion had used up 150,000 arrows. If not for the perfect logistics system established by Shanghai City's combat division, This alone would have been very difficult. If one did not experience it personally, one would not be able to imagine the cruelty of war. Behind the 50,000 dead soldiers were 50,000 families, and more than 200,000 people were implicated. The total population was comparable to that of 2 fully populated third-class counties. In the wilderness, this was extremely terrifying. In just one morning, the war had destroyed the dreams of 50,000 families. Baishar City, on top of the southern gate tower. What's going on? There's no progress at all? Ruan Ping summoned the frontline commander and scolded him. In the eyes of Ruan Ping and the others, taking down the wooden wall was not a battle achievement. This general is ashamed. The Allied commander did not dare to refute. Don't be stingy with your troops. Press forward with all your strength. We must break through the enemy's camp in the afternoon, Ruan Ping ordered. There were some things that Ruan Ping could not say too directly. He could not tell the frontline commander that the lords were not stingy with their troops and that their goal was not to win, but to destroy the Fanlihua army and take revenge on Shanghai City. If he really said that, the frontline troops would immediately be in chaos. NPC soldiers were not just a pile of data. Every soldier had their own thoughts and complete experiences. If they knew the calculations behind this war, they would probably lose all fighting spirit. How could a group of soldiers without fighting spirit talk about defeating the enemy? Yes, sir. The Allied commander's voice was hoarse. He seemed to have noticed something from the strange expressions of the lords. His heart turned cold, and he did not dare to continue thinking about it. Looking at the commander's back, Ruan Ping was a little lost in thought. It was not that Ruan Ping and the other lords were radical, but that they understood their opponent, Shanghai City, very well. This was especially true after the destruction of the teleportation formation this time around. Shanghai City's actions were bold and unconstrained, but they were also extremely meticulous. Once they attacked, they would not give the enemy a chance to turn the tables. They would use all their strength to consolidate the fruits of victory. As such, the Allied forces did not have much time left. Ruan Ping was really worried that if they dragged on, the other armies of Shanghai City would already be at the city. Facing such an opponent, Ruan Ping did not dare to have any thoughts of luck. If we can fight, then fight. In the afternoon, the war continued. With Ruan Ping's words, the Allied commander steeled his heart and decided to use his troops to buy time. For this, the commander did not hesitate to arrange for a team of supervisors to force the soldiers to charge forward. Anyone who dares to retreat will be killed without mercy. Apart from this, the commander also set up a reward. Whoever is the first to reach the second wooden wall will be rewarded with 5,000 gold coins and promoted to brigade commander. With such a generous reward, there would definitely be brave men. The Allied soldiers who did not know what was going on howled as they stepped on the corpses of their companions and charged forward. No matter how fierce the rain of arrows was, it could not stop their desire for glory and wealth. The soldiers of the Third Army clearly felt that the enemy's attacks were becoming fiercer. What a bunch of freaks! The commander of the Second Army was Song Jia's younger brother, Song Wu. Although Song Wu was stupid, he was really a fierce general. For the entire morning, Song Wu charged at the front line. During the battle, he was stabbed in the thigh by the enemy, and after bandaging the wound, he rushed back. Other people did not leave the front line with light injuries, but Song Wu did not leave the battlefield even when he was heavily injured. If not for the unique physique of players and Song Wu's deep internal energy, he probably would not have been able to hold on. In the afternoon, it was still the same. Seeing that the Allied forces had suffered such heavy casualties, they still charged forward. Song Wu could not understand. This was the fundamental difference between the armies of the wilderness and the armies of ancient times. The armies of Shanghai City were all professional soldiers, and the elites of the other territories were the same. The feudal lords were not fools. They knew that if they did not form professional armies, they would not be able to stand on the same level as the armies of the other territories. Because of this, the war in the wilderness was far crueler than in ancient times. For example, the Allied forces had lost 1/5 of their troops, but they still maintained high morale. "Damn it, they are really going all out," Song Wu spat. The last division commander to say this was Zhao Yan of the First Army. Until now, Zhao Yan had not woken up yet. He just did not know what kind of fate the Second Army and Third Army would face. The fierce fighting was endless. The air was filled with a strong smell of blood. If it was an ordinary person, they would vomit when they smelled it. Even some of the soldiers who were still fighting couldn't stand such a strong smell. Of course, there were also exceptions. Some soldiers with special physiques, under the stimulation of blood energy, were filled with killing intent. Their blood boiled, and they gradually lost their minds. All that was left was the desire to kill. This war was entering the most critical moment. As the saying goes, the first drum of spirit, the second was weak, and the third was exhausted. This was the Alliance's most intense, most reckless, and most morale-boosting wave of attack. Now, it all depended on whether the Third Army could withstand this wave. Success or failure depended on this. Chapter 739. It was the sunset glow again. The evening glow filled the sky. Birds flew across the sky, leaving behind faint shadows. The battlefield beneath the sky was in a mess. Smoke curled up in spirals, and the smell of blood rose into the air, condensing into blood-colored clouds in midair that didn't disperse for a long time, and they formed an extremely dazzling contrast with the orange glow of the sunset. The trench in the middle of the camp had been completely covered by mountains of corpses and seas of blood. There was no longer a familiar figure. Looking across the long and narrow battlefield, all one could see were corpses and broken weapons. The barricades had been smashed into smithereens, and the exquisite 3-bow 8-bull bed crossbows and catapults had also been completely destroyed. They could no longer function and were abandoned on the battlefield, with no one paying any attention to them. The arrow towers were either cut down directly or were still emitting wisps of smoke. The densely packed arrows were stuck all over the ground, and there was practically no space left. Occasionally, there would be 1 or 2 survivors soaking in blood and moaning helplessly, waiting for death to come. The battle in the afternoon had exhausted both sides. Another 40,000 to 50,000 soldiers had completely fallen here, sacrificing themselves heroically and bidding farewell to their youth and passion. The entire battlefield was like a huge slaughterhouse. The butchers were none other than the soldiers of both sides. While they were trying their best to kill the enemy, they had also become prey on the chopping board. Fortunately, we have finally taken it down. The Allied commander looked at the messy battlefield and secretly heaved a sigh of relief. After paying a huge sacrifice, the Allied forces finally defeated the defending troops of the enemy and completely took over the second line of defense. The tenacity of the Third Army exceeded the commander's imagination. What kind of enemy is this? They are not afraid of death and are capable in battle. They are truly an iron army. In this battle, the Second Army and Third Army of the Third Army had lost 30% of their forces, nearly 8,000 soldiers. If not for the cover of the trench, the number of casualties would have increased by at least 20%. At the last moment, Fan Lihua ordered the 2 armies to abandon their positions and retreat to the second wooden wall. For the Third Army, they had no way out. The only thing they could do was to defend the second wooden wall to the death and endure the most difficult period of time. As long as they could defend it, it would be the greatest victory. In order to achieve this strategic goal, any sacrifice would be worth it. Pass down the order, continue the attack. The Allied commander looked up at the sky. Although the sky was already densely covered with sunset, the sky was not dark yet. The mission given to him by the lords was not to take down the second line of defense of the enemy's camp, but to take down the entire camp. Therefore, the Allied forces had to use the last bit of time they had to break through the second wooden wall in one go. Victory is at hand. The commander muttered to himself as if he wanted to strengthen his confidence. The war horn sounded again. The exhausted Allied soldiers climbed up from the ground one by one, as if they were zombies. When the war had just come to an end, the exhausted Allied soldiers no longer had any scruples. They directly lay down on the pile of corpses and rested. For the experienced veterans, making the most of their time to recover their stamina would increase their chances of survival. Compared to survival, mountains of corpses and seas of blood were nothing. They had no time to think about it now. Even the weakest soldier was used to the smell of blood on the battlefield. Like zombies, the soldiers rose from the graveyard and gripped the weapons in their hands tightly. The bugle horn sounded, and their eyes shone with a bloodthirsty light. Kill! The vast Allied forces once again charged to the front line. In order to take down the second wooden wall, the Allied commander could be said to have put in a lot of effort. Outside the battlefield, there was a reserve force of 30,000 people. They had not entered the battlefield since the beginning and had rested for an entire day. At the crucial moment, the commander did not hesitate to send this reserve force into the battlefield, in order to launch the deadliest attack on the enemy camp. As soon as the war began, the 30,000 rested new soldiers charged at the front, trying to break through the third line of defense of the camp in one go with their abundant energy. Unfortunately, the Allied forces were facing the famous General Fanlihua, a general who was many times more brilliant than the Allied commander. In every major battle, reserve forces must be left behind, even if it is a 1,000-man team. Grasping and using the reserve forces at the right time is very important to seize the initiative in battle and obtain victory. How could Fanlihua not understand this simple logic that even the Allied commander understood? The first person in China to think about the reserve forces was the commander of the stalwart Tiger Army, Sun Bin. Sun Tzu said, "When using a formation, there are three parts. The C formation has a front, the C formation has a back, all move according to the order. Fight 1, defend 2. Attack the enemy with 1, retreat with 2. When the enemy is weak and confused, choose the soldiers first and take advantage of it. When the enemy is strong, use the soldiers first to lure them." What he meant was that the army should be distributed rationally, and not all the troops should be sent in at once. In the battle in the afternoon, even at the most tragic time, Fanlihua did not arrange for the 4th Division, which was stationed at the second wooden wall, to go forward to help. Her purpose was to guard against the Allied forces' surprise attack. As it turned out, Fanlihua's choice was very wise. The soldiers of the 4th Division had watched their brothers of the 1st Division die in the morning, and in the afternoon, they had witnessed the bloody battle of the 2nd and 3rd Divisions. The soldiers had long been holding back their energy, and now it was finally their turn to go on the battlefield. They said to the soldiers of the 3 major divisions who had retreated, "Brothers, leave the next position to us. We're counting on you." The short conversation reflected the invincible spirit of the army of Shanghai City. The last battle before nightfall slowly began. This battle would not only determine the fate of the two sides, but also the fate of the entire Lingnan city, and even the structure of the entire southern border. It would change because of this battle. Rows of torches lit up at the top of the white stone city, illuminating the front of the city. Ruan Ping and the other lords did not leave the city tower for the whole day, watching the progress of the battle uneasily. Can we still win? Some lords began to waver. The Fanlihua army in front of them was simply a monster with an immortal body. Before the battle, no one could have imagined that the enemy would be able to block an army of 250,000 soldiers outside the plains with just a makeshift camp, rendering them unable to move. No one would believe it if they said it. But the bloody truth was placed in front of them, and they had no choice but to believe it. Therefore, the lords were not confident that the Allied forces could break through the last line of defense, at least not today. Seeing that night was approaching, the Allied forces had less than 2 hours left. "It's difficult." The lord's eyes began to flicker. Some of the originally resolute lords were already secretly plotting a way out. Ruan Ping noticed that 5 or 6 lords standing at the top of the city wall had unknowingly left. Some lords saw that their troops had been destroyed on the battlefield and were unwilling to stay any longer, so they left through the back mountain path in advance. Some lords were purely cowardly and did not have any expectations for this battle at all, so they left with their personal guards in advance. After all, the path was just a path, and it was difficult. If everyone left like a swarm of bees, who knew what kind of nonsense would occur? Rather than that, it was better to leave early. At the very least, they did not have to line up. Moreover, the earlier they left, the easier it would be for them to pack up after returning to their territories. The lords who remained at the top of the city wall, apart from those with backbone and courage, were the downtrodden people, whose territories had long since fallen under the iron hooves of the Shanghai City Army. These lords were the most miserable. They could not even pack up their belongings and go to the royal city to become rich people. The only bargaining chip in their hands was the army outside the city. As for the pitiful people who had lost their armies, they had long committed suicide. Just as the various lords were lost in their thoughts, a rumbling sound suddenly came from the distant horizon. Raising his head to look, he saw a vast and boundless army. Under the afterglow of the setting sun, they swiftly and firmly marched towards White Stone City with an invincible aura. The huge golden dragon flag was dazzling. "It's the Shanghai City Army." The lords recognized it at a glance. It was the vanguard of the 10,000 Years Sure Army. They had finally arrived at White Stone City at the appointed time. "It's over." Some lords closed their eyes, unable to bear to witness the tragedy that was about to happen. Even more lords did not say a word and directly left the city wall, disappearing without a trace. The Fanlihua army alone was enough to make the Allied army suffer. With the addition of the 10,000 Years Sure Army, the Allied army had no chance of breaking through. It could be imagined that there would be even more armies converging on White Stone City. There was no point in staying any longer. The lords did not want to stay and humiliate themselves. Leaving was the best choice. If they did not leave now, they would not be able to leave even if they wanted to. For a moment, before the 10,000 Years Sure Army reached the front lines, the huge city wall became empty. It was not just the lords who left, but also their personal guards. In the end, Ruan Ping was the only one left in the city wall. He stood there alone, his face pale. Ruan Ping did not want to leave. He had already deserted once in the Battle of Zhaoqing. He did not want to desert in front of Shanghai City a second time. That was his last bit of dignity. Perhaps there would be a miracle? The arrival of the 10,000 Years Sure Army did not only shock the lords on the city wall. It was also a huge blow to the Allied army. The attack on the second wooden wall was not going smoothly to begin with. Who would have thought that the enemy would send reinforcements at this critical juncture? The Allied army's commander had a pained expression. He raised his head and looked at the empty city wall. He sighed in his heart. In the end, he could not bear to send his soldiers to die for nothing. This was the first time that the Allied army's commander had ordered a retreat without receiving any orders. The Allied soldiers, whose morale had already been greatly reduced, did not hesitate at all when they heard the drums of retreat. They scrambled to leave the battlefield, afraid that they would not be able to run fast enough. As for the soldiers of the 4th Division stationed on the wooden wall, they also tacitly stopped shooting. Fanlihua was very clear that the Allied army had already lost the ability to resist. Since that was the case, it was better not to kill for no reason. It could also be considered as leaving some seeds for the future reorganization of the army. None of the famous generals were truly bloodthirsty people. Killing was only a means, not an end. Chapter 740. As the Sure Wanshui army arrived at the battlefield, the Battle of Baisher City came to an end. No one knew if it was to atone for his sins or to protect his last bit of dignity. That night, Knowing that there was no hope for a comeback, Yuan Ping committed suicide on the South Gate Tower, completing his curtain call as a lord. Yuan Ping's suicide was regrettable. It couldn't be said that Yuan Ping didn't work hard. Yuan Ping was definitely not an ignorant playboy. He had even achieved glorious achievements and stood at the forefront of the struggle. Yuan Ping's fall could only reflect the cruelty of the wilderness once again. The wilderness was like breeding insects. Only the strongest could live to the end and stand at the top of the world. This was a world where the winner took all and the losers lost everything. In the end, there were only a few winners, but there were countless losers who became stepping stones. With Yuan Ping's suicide, the Yuan family officially withdrew from the wilderness. At this point, the four major families of Lingnan were all forced to withdraw from the wilderness. The best ending was the Song family, which was only transformed into a large chamber of commerce. The remaining three families all ended up in dire straits. The experience of the four major families of Lingnan in the game was the epitome of the medium-sized forces in the China region. They first relied on their resource advantage in the game to gain the upper hand in the game. Then, in the cruel competition in the wilderness, more than 90% of them were eliminated because they weren't acclimatized. The ambitions of most of the families vanished in an instant along with the loss of their territories. It was as if they were drawing water with a sieve. There were those crazy ones who exchanged a large amount of achievement points in the real world and lost even more. Earth on Loop provided a chance for players around the world to reshuffle the cards, but not everyone would become the winner in this reshuffle. More than 90% of the players just walked around freely once. Only the few lucky ones could achieve a counterattack by relying on luck or talent and reach the peak of life. As for Ouyang Shua's experience, it wasn't replicable and had no value as a reference. After Yuan Ping's suicide, there was no longer a lord in Baishur City. Even the lord of Baishur City had fled. The allies who received the news were in an uproar. They fought with their lives for a whole day and sacrificed nearly 100,000 brothers, only to be heartlessly abandoned. It was hard to accept. The crowd was agitated and the camp went out of control. That night, a large number of soldiers left the camp and ran to the opposite camp to surrender. Fan Lihua naturally didn't refuse any of them. First, it was one by one, then team by team, and finally, it turned into a collective surrender of battalions. For the entire night, the area outside White Stone City did not stop for a single moment. It was extremely noisy and bustling. The next morning, when the commander of the Allied forces saw that the camp was half empty, he spat out a mouthful of saliva, gritted his teeth, and led the entire army to surrender. The cowardice of the city lords completely chilled the hearts of the generals in the army. It would be foolish to pledge loyalty to such a lord. Rather than that, he might as well seek refuge in the glorious Shanghai city and embark on a new journey on the battlefield. In other words, the alliance was not a complete loser in this battle. As long as they survived, it was a kind of victory. The real losers were the fallen lords and the soldiers who died on the battlefield yesterday. Knowing that the Alliance army was going to surrender, Fan Lihua did not dare to delay at all. She secretly contacted the 10,000-year army and got the latter to immediately enter the camp and accept the surrender of the Alliance army together. Last night, the follow-up troops of the 10,000-year army had arrived one after another. Fan Lihua did not want to cause any more trouble when the overall situation was already set. In military matters, it was always right to be cautious. As it turned out, Fan Lihua was overthinking. This time, the Alliance army was truly sincere in surrendering. In order to avoid being misunderstood by the Shanghai City army, they even took the initiative to disarm themselves and waited patiently for Shanghai City to reorganize. In the camp, the Alliance Army's commander handed Fan Lihua the Alliance Army's roster and commander's seal. Just this alone saved a lot of work for the general administration of military affairs. Because of this, Fan Lihua's impression of the Alliance Army's commander increased greatly. In the battle yesterday, the Alliance Army's commander's command was also commendable and not mediocre. If he was really mediocre, he would not have the ability to ascend to the throne of the Alliance Army's commander. If Ouyang Shuo was here, he would recognize this commander. Speaking of which, this was also a famous historical general. He was none other than the founding general of the Eastern Han Dynasty, Feng Yi. Name: Feng Yi. Emperor level, Dynasty, Eastern Han Dynasty. Identity: None. Occupation: Special Class General. Loyalty: 65 points. Commander: 84. Martial Power: 68. Intelligence: 75. Politics: 72. Specialties: Wise General: increases troop morale by 30, increases troop attack by 20, increases troop supply by 30. Skills: None. Equipment: None. Evaluation: Feng Yi was both talented in literature and military strategy. Not only was he outstanding in battle, but he was also very successful in governing the county. His character was humble and unyielding, and he was not arrogant when claiming credit. It could be said that he was rare and commendable. In history, Feng Yi was a wise general, a scholarly general, skilled in both literature and martial arts. What was even rarer was that Feng Yi had outstanding military achievements, but he was never arrogant and modest. Even in Shanghai City, such a general was rare. Feng Yi was originally the Inchuan County deputy of the new dynasty. He later submitted to Lu Xiu and fought with him. He defeated Qi Mei, pacified Guanzhong, and helped Lu Xiu establish the Eastern Han Dynasty. After Lu Xiu became emperor, Feng Yi was conferred the title of Great General of the West and Marquis of Yangxia. In the 10th year of Jianwu, he died of illness in the army and was given the title of Marquis of Jiedu. In the 3rd year of Emperor Yongping of the Eastern Han Dynasty, Emperor Lu Zhuang ordered people to draw the portraits of 28 generals in Luoyang's Nangong Yuntai Pavilion. They were called the 28 Yuntai generals, corresponding to the 28 lunar mansions. The 28 generals of the cloud platform referred to the 28 generals under Emperor Guangwu of Han, Lu Xiu, who had contributed the most to the unification of the world and the revival of the Han dynasty. Among them, Feng Yi and Sun Peng made the greatest contributions. The Book of the Later Han Dynasty, Volume 17 said, "There were many generals who made great contributions, but Sun Peng and Feng Yi were the only ones who made great contributions from the west of Hanggu to the south of Fangcheng." If Feng and Jia did not attack, Duke Tsun's loyalty was enough to make the three armies sympathize with the enemy. Thus, he was able to accomplish great things and finally complete the Qing dynasty. From this, one could see Feng Yi's ability. In the wilderness, Feng Yi was originally a general under the command of De Tong County in Chaozhou County. Because of his outstanding talent, he was appointed as the commander of the Allied army. Feng Yi was an upright man. In the battle yesterday, to prevent other generals from accusing him of favoritism, De Tong County's army was sent out in the first wave of attack. After the battle, De Tong County's 6,000 soldiers were almost completely annihilated. Just yesterday, De Tong County was captured by Hua Tsubing's army. When the lord of De Tong County saw this, he no longer had any intentions of staying and left Baisher City. If Ruan Ping and the others had not stopped him, Feng Yi would have been taken away. With Feng Yi's cooperation, it became much easier to accept the surrendered army. In the end, a total of 150,000 Allied soldiers surrendered. Just the cavalry alone amounted to 100,000. The price that Fan Lihua's army paid was the death of 20,000 soldiers. After a short pause, Fan Lihua, Shi Wansui, and Wu Lai, who had arrived in the morning, entered Baisher City hand in hand. At this point, the Battle of Baisher City was completely over. Next, they would stay in Baisher City for a short time before continuing on their journey. Shanghai City, the headquarters of the General Military Affairs Department. The glorious results that Fan Lihua's army achieved exceeded the expectations of the General Military Affairs Department. The goal set by the General Military Affairs Department was only to stop 250,000 Allied soldiers. They did not expect to wake up one night and find that the Allied army no longer existed. Du Ruhui had already formed an army reorganization team and was ready to immediately teleport to Zhenhai City before heading to Baisher City to be responsible for reorganizing the 150,000 Allied soldiers who had surrendered. At the same time, the wounded Fan Lihua's army would also rest in Baisher City. First, it was to take the opportunity to replenish the number of soldiers who had died in battle. Second, it was also to guard the 150,000 surrendered soldiers until the reorganization was completed. This reorganization was only a preliminary calculation. The real reorganization of the army would have to wait until the Battle of Lingnan was over before it was unified. Kemming, I'll leave the rest to you. After staying up all night, Ouyang Shua's worried heart was finally at ease. He was ready to go back and catch up on sleep. Don't worry, my lord. In the last half a month, we will definitely be able to conquer the entire Lingnan city. Du Ruhui was not sleepy at all. She was very energetic and excited. It was no wonder that the victory of the Battle of Baisher City was too exciting. Ouyang Shua nodded with a smile. Don't be too hasty. We have to guard against what should be guarded against, especially the Xiangnan province in the north. I heard that they have already sent troops? Yes. Du Ruhui nodded with a smile. He knew what his lord was worried about. When attacking the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom, the Shanghai City Army was careless in the case of a great victory. The Xiangnan City-State and the Chuanbei City-State joined forces and seized Guilin County. That was also one of the few blemishes in the war history of Shanghai City. Now that the Xiangnan City-State had marched into Shaozhou County, his lord naturally did not want history to repeat itself. In fact, Du Ruhui thought that there was basically no such possibility. If the other side was rational, after learning about the situation in Baisher City, they would take the initiative to withdraw their troops and not get involved in this muddy water again. After all, today was different from the past. When attacking the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom, the Shanghai City Army was pinned down and could not return in time. This time was different. Of the 4 major legions that were originally arranged to annihilate the Allied army, only the Fan Lihua's army was trapped. The other 3 legions did not even have the chance to intervene in the Battle of Baisher City. Needless to say, the Huatsubing's army and the Diqing's army were gradually advancing towards Shaozhou County. If the Xiangnan City-State really did not know what was good for them and insisted on invading Shaozhou County, Shanghai City would have no scruples this time and directly go to war. Thinking about it, the other side would not be able to gain the slightest advantage from the 2 famous generals Huatsubing and Diqing. Ouyang Shua was just giving instructions according to the rules. He hoped that the south of Rosy Clouds would be a little bolder. In that case, Shanghai City would have the opportunity to intervene in the affairs of the Xiangnan City-State. Considering the existence of Zhang Liang, this possibility was almost non-existent. Chapter 741. When Ouyang Shua returned to the mansion, Qing was already waiting for him. Big brother! Qing eyes were red as if she had just cried. Ouyang Shua frowned and said lightly, Wang Feng refused? He's a stubborn bull. These days, Qing had run into a wall with Wang Feng, and the result was not ideal. Wang Feng had a very strong self-esteem. No matter what Qing said, he was not willing to agree to the marriage when his arm was broken. What can I do? Ouyang Shua asked. Ouyang Shua could not force Wang Feng to agree to the marriage with his identity as the emperor. Not to mention that a melon that was forcibly picked would not be sweet, it would also be a blow to the prestige of the protectorate. As the emperor, Ouyang Shua had to consider the impact in this aspect. Qing made a request that surprised Ouyang Shua. She said, Big brother, can you temporarily relieve him of his military post and arrange for him to study in the Eastern Fence Sword faction? You've given up? No. Qing shook her head and her eyes were firm. I've also found that with his temper, it's useless to persuade him if he can't be cured. I'll wait until the day he stands up again. Good, good. Ouyang Shua looked at the girl in front of him, full of emotion. The magic of love could make people dizzy, and it could also make a person grow up quickly. I'll arrange it. Ouyang Shua did not hesitate. Thank you, big brother. Qing bowed. Seeing that Ouyang Shua looked a little tired, she did not disturb him and left. In the next half a month, the battle in the Lingnan region progressed smoothly. The battle in Baisher City shocked the entire China region. The lightning action of Shanghai City made some people with ulterior motives not have time to act, and the battle in the Lingnan region was basically over. Overlord City was one of them. Xiongba had already planned to directly reinforce the Lingnan city-state, but when he learned that Baisher City had fallen, he immediately gave up the idea and turned his energy to instigate a rebellion. Rosy Cloud City also retreated. As Du Ruhui expected, as soon as they learned about the battle in Baisher City, the temporarily organized coalition army in the south of Rosy Cloud City immediately withdrew from Shaozhou County. Then, a Xiangnan city-state further strengthened the border garrison. The entire China region was watching in awe as Shanghai City rose to power once again. In less than a month, it had taken over half of the province. As the various factions withdrew, the Imperial Guard Army, the City Guard Army, the Second Dragon Stallion Army, and the 2 legions of the Stalwart Tiger Army, totaling 350,000 soldiers, began to launch a carpet assault on the 3 counties. There was not a single blind spot in the 3 counties. Wherever the army passed, the major cities surrendered at the mere sight of them. Any stubborn power was like a mantis trying to stop a chariot under the iron hooves of the vast army, and they were all transformed into powder. The 3 counties were in a state of panic. As the war neared its end, the well-prepared Protectorate of the southern border dispatched a large number of officials from the various counties to the 3 counties to take over the cities, stabilize the hearts of the people, and restore civil affairs. For this expansion, the Southern Border Protectorate had prepared for half a year and gathered a large number of officials, waiting for the end of the war to show off their skills. Shanghai City, Protectorate of the Southern Border, in his study, Ouyang Shua and the 4 directors of the General Administration were discussing the personnel arrangements for the governors of the 3 counties. Song Wen, the governor of Seakeeper City, would be promoted to the governor of Jiaozhou County. There was no objection to this arrangement. First, Song Wen's achievements in the battle against Seakeeper City were obvious to all, so his promotion to governor was within reason. Second, Seakeeper City was still under Song Wen's name. In order to maintain the teleportation formation there, Song Wen could not leave Seakeeper City or Jiaozhou County. This time, Song Wen could be considered to have picked up a huge bargain. Jiaozhou County was not only the largest county of the Southridge Province, but also the largest of the counties of Shanghai City, even larger than the recently annexed Kunming County. Moreover, Jiaozhou County had an excellent geographical location, crisscrossing rivers, and a natural harbor like Jiaozhou Harbor. It had a solid foundation, abundant natural resources, and a dense population. It could be said to be the heart of the Southridge Province. If not for Seakeeper City, no matter how capable Song Wen was, he would not have been able to get promoted to this level. Besides Jiaozhou County, there was also Chaozhou County and Shaozhou County. According to the battle reports from the front lines, when they conquered the counties, they did not find any outstanding historical officials. There were only a few insignificant officials who were only qualified to be the prefectural magistrate. Therefore, the 3 governors had to be appointed by the Protectorate of Southern Border. After Xiao He's suggestion, Hu Guang, the head of the tax bureau under the General Administration of Finance, stood out from the other officials and was appointed as the governor of Shaozhou County. Hu Guang was an outstanding talent, so it was indeed a waste of his talent to be the head of the tax bureau. Ouyang Shua had long intended to send Hu Guang out, but he had not found an opportunity. Since Xiao He took the initiative to suggest it, Ouyang Shuo did not stop him and went along with the arrangement. Hu Guang was talented in both literature and martial arts. With him overseeing Shaozhou County, they could better monitor their neighbors in the north. Shaozhou County was an active volcano that could erupt at any time. With Hu Guang, a historical general, overseeing the county, Ouyang Shuo could rest assured. Although Xiao He's suggestion was appropriate, it might not be without selfish motives. Hu Guang was born in the Western Han Dynasty and could be said to be of the same lineage as Xiao He, the first prime minister of the Western Han Dynasty. The two of them had a close relationship. To Xiao He, promoting Hu Guang was a win-win situation. Ouyang Shuo was very clear about this, but he adopted a tacit agreement. He was against his subordinates forming cliques for personal gain, but he would not go to the extreme and forbid any form of connections. In ancient officialdom, it was difficult to eliminate clique. Ouyang Shuo's attitude towards this was that officials could connect openly, but they could not secretly form cliques for personal gain. The last county governor had a difficult labor. After searching through all the important officials in the protectorate of southern border, there were some who could become a governor. For example, Zhang Tingyu, Su Zhe, Pei Yun, and Xiahou Dun were all qualified. It was just that these important officials held important positions and could not leave. Just when the discussion was in a difficult position, the head of the Finance Bureau, Fan Li, suddenly spoke. "My lord, I have a suggestion." "Please speak." Ouyang Shuo's eyes flashed with a trace of surprise. Ever since the Saint of Commerce Fan Li joined Shanghai City, other than speaking out on the territory's financial affairs, he had kept a low profile on other matters. One must know that Fan Li's ability was not limited to business. He was the cream of the crop in both literature and martial arts, and his strategy was even better than that of ordinary strategists. Ouyang Shuo guessed that Fan Li was keeping a low profile because he was using the Southwest University China Hall to make up for his lack of knowledge. After all, Fan Li was born in the Spring and Autumn Warring States period, which was far from China's most complete and prosperous era. As for how to govern a territory, Fan Li still had a lot of knowledge to learn and assimilate. Secondly, Fan Li was probably observing Shanghai City and Ouyang Shuo, the lord. This showed how cautious he was. Now that Fan Li suddenly spoke out on the territory's financial affairs, did it mean that he had truly acknowledged Ouyang Shuo as the lord, and was prepared to truly show off his abilities in Shanghai City? That was why Ouyang Shuo felt a little excited. A strange light flashed in the eyes of the other three bureau chiefs. All the bureau chiefs present were shrewd people, so they were naturally able to capture the hidden message. What kind of impact would Fan Li's sudden, high-profile impact on Shanghai City's officialdom? They would have to think about this question carefully. Fan Li was calm and said, "According to the Lord, the territory will be officially established next year, and Shanghai City will be the future capital. Since that's the case, some things have to be prepared in advance, such as the matter of Zhili. I think it's time to make the entire Lianzhou County part of Shanghai City's Zhili." Zhili referred to the area directly under the capital. The term originated from the Ming dynasty and lasted until the Qing dynasty. Even in modern society there was still a similar concept. In the Qing dynasty, the governor of Zhili was ranked first among the 8 governors in the country, and only important officials could take up the post. Previously, the surrounding counties of Shanghai City had all been brought under the jurisdiction of Shanghai City. Fan Li's proposal this time was obviously a step forward on this basis, and the entire Lianzhou Basin would be directly under the jurisdiction of Shanghai City, and Lianzhou County would no longer be established separately. I second the motion. Making Lianzhou County part of Zhili in advance will also make it easier to allocate resources in the Lianzhou Basin and speed up the construction of Shanghai City, so that we can reach the population limit earlier. The one who spoke was Wei Yang. As the head of the Internal Affairs Bureau, He was in charge of the Civil Affairs Bureau, and the population issue was under his jurisdiction. Naturally, Wei Yang was also responsible for the migration of Shanghai City's population. That's right. As the population of Shanghai City increases rapidly, the demand for agricultural products and other resources increases. The supplies from the surrounding counties can no longer meet the needs of Shanghai City. Now that we have to allocate resources from Lianzhou County, we can break through this boundary by making Lianzhou County part of Jili City earlier, Xiao He seconded. As a result, only the head of the Military Affairs Bureau, Du Ruhui, did not speak. If Fan Li's low profile was said to be a silent observation, then Du Ruhui's low profile was really low profile. This head of the Military Affairs Bureau, who had extraordinary decision-making power, would basically not speak during the discussion as long as it did not involve military affairs. She would always play the role of a listener. A soldier should not interfere with the officialdom. This was the bottom line that Du Ruhui drew for herself. Ouyang Shua smiled and readily accepted the good advice. He said, "Since everyone has reached a consensus, then this matter is decided. From now on, Lianzhou County will be abolished, and all the land in the Lianzhou Basin will be transferred to Jili City, under the direct management of Shanghai Magistrate Zhang Wenzhong." Ouyang Shua did not intend to make Zhang Wenzhong, the Shanghai magistrate, change his position for the time being. What Ouyang Shua was most satisfied with about Zhang Wenzhong was that he had not been involved in any faction so far. My lord is wise. None of the bureau chiefs were surprised by Jun Shang's straightforwardness. After finalizing the matter of Jili, Ouyang Shua returned to the main topic. He looked at Fan Li and said with a smile, "Does Minister Fan mean to recommend the former Lianzhou County Magistrate, Wei Ran, to take up the post of Chaozhou County Magistrate?" Chapter 742. I only suggested the establishment of Jili Commandery. The appointment and removal of personnel will be decided by the Emperor. Fan Li avoided answering the Emperor's question. Old fox. Ouyang Shua sighed. Fan Li was as cautious as ever. Even though he started to speak out on territory matters, he was still unwilling to get involved in the most sensitive personnel matters. Although Fan Li said this, Wei Ran's appointment was quickly approved. He was relieved of his Lian Prefecture prefectural magistrate position and transferred to Chao Prefecture prefectural magistrate. Now that Wei Ran was transferred out of the capital, some people would probably heave a sigh of relief. Although Wei Ran was good and capable, he was a little greedy. During his tenure as Lian Prefecture prefectural magistrate, his greed started to show. Shen Buhai reported this to Ouyang Shua many times. The people's evaluation of Wei Ran was also mixed. Even Xiao He had some complaints about Wei Ran. Ouyang Shua was magnanimous to keep such an official in the capital. Wei Ran's transfer could be considered as a warning to him. On the 8th of the 10th month, the appointment of the 3 prefectural magistrates was announced. Other than the 3 prefectural magistrates, the successor of Hua Guang as the tax bureau chief was also announced. This person was recommended by Fan Li, a top disciple of Shang clan, and had always been an important assistant to Hua Guang. As the news was announced, the territory was in an uproar again. When Song clan received the news, they were naturally overjoyed and swept away their previous gloominess. Of course, clan head Song Tianxiong did not forget to warn the clan members not to be arrogant and willful. They could not use Song clan's power to seek personal gains, or else they would be courting death. Song Tianxiong vaguely sensed from his daughter Song Jia that Ouyang Shua probably controlled a secret intelligence agency that monitored the officials. From this, Song Tianxiong thought of the famous embroidered uniform guards in history. Thinking of this, Song Tianxiong's heart turned cold. It could be imagined that if Song clan committed a crime, with Ouyang Shua's incorruptibility, no one could save Song clan. The 2 brothers Song and Song Wu had already become the core pillars of Song clan. Old Master Song had even expressed his admiration and favoritism towards these two grandsons on different occasions. Ruan Clan's defeat made Song Tianxiong and the rest happy, but thinking back, they felt a chill in their hearts. In reality, that little brat had already grown into a giant that they had to look up to and even revere. Even in the Song family, even old Master Song, Ouyang Shua, didn't dare to call him by his name. Some people rejoiced, while others were worried. The little girl, Hua Qingjun, was very unhappy because she was going to move to Shaozhou County with her father. As such, he could no longer go to the protectorate of the southern border to play with big sister Binger. More importantly, she couldn't see her brother Jun. When it was time to leave, Ouyang Shua personally saw Hua Guang and his family off. Hua Qingjun cried his heart out, which was very lovable. When Hua Guang saw this, he could only smile bitterly at Jun Mo apologetically. Looking at Hua Qingjun's displeasure, Wei Ran looked a little lonely. Wei Ran could be considered as the most experienced county governor in the territory, but now, he was being ridden over by Song and the other juniors. How could he not feel lonely? Wei Ran was not a fool. He had already thought about the day when Lianzhou County would be abolished and transferred to Zhili. He had always yearned for the position of the prefectural governor of Zhili. He didn't expect to suffer a crushing defeat in the competition with Zhang Zhong. Although he was lonely, Wei Ran didn't dare to complain. Wei Ran also realized that his little tricks in Lianzhou County had probably been seen by Jun Mo. Moreover, his son-in-law Bai Qi was no longer the only divine general in the territory, so his authority was greatly reduced. Moreover, with Bai Qi's character, he wouldn't ask his father-in-law to mediate anything. Therefore, Wei Ran could only obediently go to Chaozhou County to take up the post. Ouyang Shua didn't really give up on Wei Ran. Before leaving, Ouyang Shua told Wei Ran to manage Chaozhou County well. As long as he made contributions, it was not impossible for him to return to the center of power in the future. Thank you, Jun. Wei Ran was filled with emotion. October 10th, Baisher City. The Battle of Lingnan was completely over. Ouyang Shua brought Du Ruhui and other big shots of the General Administration of Military Affairs to Baisher City to preside over a new round of army reorganization. He chose Baisher City for two reasons. Firstly, the 150,000 Allied troops were settled here. Secondly, this place was of great significance. The 6 generals, Sun Bin, Hua Tsubing, Shi Wansui, Eli Diqing, and Fan Lihua, left their respective troops and gathered in Baisher City to report the results of the battle. Fan Lihua's corps was the biggest contributor to the battle. They captured 150,000 Allied troops and lost 20,000. The other 5 corps each suffered about 4,000 to 5,000 casualties and captured more than 90,000 field army soldiers. They basically wiped out all the field armies in the 3 counties. Apart from that, there were also garrison troops in various places. According to preliminary statistics, there were no less than 50,000 people. However, compared to the field army, the quality of the soldiers in the local garrison troops was a level lower. It was not suitable for them to be integrated into the field army. There was nothing much to say about the garrison troops. Other than the 3 guard regiments, the rest of the soldiers were either transferred to reserve duty or arranged for retirement. The focus of the army reorganization this time was the 240,000 field army prisoners of war. After deducting the losses of the major corps, there were still 3 corps to be reorganized. Before coming to Baisher City, Ouyang Shua had already made some plans on how to arrange these 3 corps. First, he would form the 2nd Corps of the Imperial Guard. The main task was to select 70,000 of the most elite cavalry from the 100,000 Allied cavalry troops to form the 2nd Corps of the Imperial Guards. The Allied troops were the best troops in the Lingnan city. They were well trained and had excellent quality soldiers. They could even be directly integrated into the Imperial Guard. This time, 70,000 of the cavalry were selected from 100,000. It could be said that they were the best of the best. The corps would be reorganized and trained according to the historical standards of the Tiger Leopard Cavalry. The Tiger Leopard Cavalry was originally the Imperial Guard system and could be said to be of the same origin. The commander of the Imperial Guards, Huotsubing, was best at cavalry battles. However, the conditions were limited. The original Imperial Guards only had 2 cavalry regiments, and one of them was a special cavalry regiment called the Ironback Beast Cavalry Regiment. The formation of the Second Corps of the Imperial Guards was undoubtedly to make up for this shortcoming. At the same time, it also gave the genius General Huotsubing more room to perform. The commander of the Tiger Leopard Cavalry, Ouyang Shua, designated Ma Chao, who was still studying. At the same time, the historical commander of the Tiger Leopard Cavalry, Chao Chun, was designated as the deputy commander and the commander of the First Corps. Ma Chao and Chao Chun worked together and supervised each other. Other than these two, Ma Chao's younger brother, Ma Xiu, was appointed as the commander of the Third Corps. The original commander of the First Corps of the Imperial Guards, Lin Yi, was transferred to the Second Corps and became the commander of the Second Corps. With Lin Yi, a local general, it would be easier for the Second Corps to integrate into the Imperial Guard system. The position that Lin Yi left vacant would be taken over by the old General Ma Ting. The 5 horses of Shiliang were all experts in cavalry battles. Ouyang Shua naturally wanted to make the best use of their talents. As for the remaining 2 commanders of the Second Corps of the Imperial Guards, they would be directly promoted from generals who had been demoted. The Allied army had no lack of capable generals. After all, they were the top generals of their respective territories. Shanghai City's use of people was never based on birth. Speaking of which, didn't the current army expand step by reorganizing the prisoners of war? Shanghai City had long stopped recruiting new soldiers from their territories. This was also the wilderness where wars were frequent, which was why Shanghai City did this. Every time a war broke out, not only would there be no casualties, but they would also gain a large number of prisoners of war. This model could not be imitated by other territories. The second was to form the Third Corps of the Leopard Army. The Soaring Dragon Army, the Stalwart Tiger Army, and the Leopard Army had 3 corps. Only the Leopard Army currently only had 2 corps. Ouyang Shua naturally wouldn't forget about the Leopard Army in this expansion. The commander of the Third Corps of the Leopard Army was Ouyang Shua's former commander, the old General Feng Yi. One reason was that Feng Yi's strength was enough to lead an entire corps. The second reason was to use Feng Yi's promotion to pacify the surrendered armies. At the same time, Chao Hong and Ma Tai, the 2 valiant generals who were still in training, would take up the positions of division commanders of the 1st and 2nd Divisions of the 3rd Corps respectively after completing their training. The last of the 5 horses of Shiliang, Ma Dai, would be assigned to the 3rd Corps of the Dragon Stalwart Army, the Zhang Liao Army. He would be the vice commander and commander of the 1st Corps. Since the Zhang Liao Army was being reorganized, Ouyang Shua naturally had to arrange for a general to balance out Zhang Liao's existence. The third was to form the 4th Corps of the Dragon Stalwart Army. Logically speaking, this was the home field of the Stalwart Tiger Army, and the last corps spot should have been reserved for them. Ouyang Shua had made this arrangement out of strategic considerations. With the entirety of the Lingnan province under Shanghai City's rule, the territory would be bordered by the Minnan province to the east and the Jiangchuan province to the northeast. The overall security situation would be greatly improved. The only threat would come from the Xiangnan province to the north. The Yunnan province where the Dragon Stalwart Army was located would become the next main battlefield of the territory. The 3 corps of the Dragon Stalwart Army would be somewhat overstretched, so they needed reinforcements. After all these considerations, Ouyang Shua decided to prioritize the establishment of the 4th Corps of the Dragon Stalwart Army. Ouyang Shua chose the young General Luo Shixin to be the commander of the 4th Corps. Luo Shixin's talent had always been extraordinary, but he had died an untimely death, which was why he had not made a name for himself in history. In the last 2 years, under Bai Qi's personal tutelage, Luo Shixin had rapidly matured into a rare great general of cavalry. Moreover, Luo Shixin was a veteran general of Shanghai City with outstanding achievements. There would be almost no resistance in the army if Luo Shixin became the commander of the 4th Corps. At the same time, Ouyang Shao also arranged for the fierce General Xiahou Yuan to be the vice-commander of the 4th Corps as well as the commander of the 1st Corps to assist Luo Shixin. With these two and Bai Qi as the commander, there should be no major problems. At this point, all the vacancies in the 3 corps had been taken care of. The 5 horses of Shiliang, the Chao brothers, Xiahou Yuan, and the other generals of the 3 countries had all taken their places. Chapter 743. This round of military reorganization involved 3 field legions, totaling more than 200,000 soldiers. It was another huge military expenditure for the territory. According to estimates, just the one-time military expenditure would reach 1.5 million gold coins if one included pensions. Even more terrifying was the daily military expenditure. After the 3 major armies were reorganized, the number of Shanghai City's field legions would reach 13. Just the monthly military expenditure would reach a staggering 500,000 gold coins. Together with the 5 fleets of the Nanyang Navy, as well as the military's monthly expenditure on rations, weapons and equipment replenishment and upgrading, as well as war pensions, Shanghai City's monthly military expenditure would exceed 1 million gold coins. More than 60% of Shanghai City's financial income was invested into the military. After deducting other financial expenditure, Shanghai City's monthly tax revenue exceeded 1 million, but it still did not have a single bit of net financial income. It could even be said that some of the territory's major projects had to be completed with loans from the Bank of the Four Seas. The one-time expenditure for the military expansion was paid out of Ouyang Shua's own pocket. He took out 1.5 million gold coins from his savings. If not, the finance department would have to seek another loan from the Bank of the Four Seas. As such, Ouyang Shua's personal wealth had shrunk to 6.5 million gold coins. If the promised 500,000 gold coins for the 7th Research Institute were deducted, he would only be left with 6 million gold coins. For Gaia's 4th annual global auction, Ouyang Shua needed to prepare at least 5 million gold coins. This also meant that Ouyang Shua did not have much money at his disposal. This was Shanghai City. Not only did it have developed commerce, it also had the support of shipbuilding, military, textile, banks, and steel industries. If it were any other territory, they would have long been dragged down by such a huge military expenditure. As such, it was not difficult to understand why Ouyang Shua wanted to promote ocean trade. If not for the huge profits from ocean trade, Shanghai City would not be able to support such a large army. If he really expanded the military, the territory's various constructions would come to a standstill. Shanghai City was able to lead the territory's industrialization while expanding its military, accelerate the territory's infrastructure, and improve basic education and basic medical care. It could be considered a miracle in the wilderness. Therefore, if the territory were to blindly wage war without considering the territory's internal affairs, solidify the territory's foundation, and promote the development of various industries, the result would be being completely exhausted by the army. This was the situation described by being militaristic. With the implementation of the military reorganization plan, the various corps would also begin to mobilize. Needless to say, the city guards would set off for home after the battle. The main army would first head to Oceanwood City, then board the battleship and return to Shanghai City by sea. Ouyang Shua did not leave a reserve force for the Lingnan battle, which was a very risky choice. If there was any emergency in the western region or the northern region, it would be too late to rescue them. The city guards stationed outside Shanghai City were the main reserve force, and they could be teleported to the other provinces at any time to reinforce the front lines. After the country was established, the city guards could no longer be mobilized as they wished in order to protect the capital. Unless the situation was dire, the city guards would be permanently stationed outside the city to protect the safety of the capital at all times. Similarly, it was not advisable for the imperial guards to go out to battle often. Otherwise, if the vast capital city did not have a powerful army to protect it at all times, it would easily cause unrest in the imperial court, destabilize the hearts of the people, and cause turbulent undercurrents. The slightest carelessness could lead to the downfall of the empire. This had been the case for every dynasty in history. Even at the juncture of life and death, the emperors would not easily move the city guard or imperial guard out of the capital. This was the reason for this. Besides the city guard, the 1st Imperial Guard Army and the 2nd Dragon Stallion Army would rest and reorganize before setting out. They would travel by land through Zhaoqing County, Wuzhou County, Xuanzhou County, and Jinan County to return to the battlefield in Yunnan. The entire journey would probably take 1 month. The drawbacks of mobilizing soldiers on such a large scale were obvious. More than half of the time was spent on the road. This was precisely why a war zone was needed. In the future, wars would generally be handled by war zones, and it was very rare for an army to be moved across war zones. As for the 2nd Imperial Guard Army and the 4th Dragon Stallion Army, they would follow the same route to the battlefield in Yunnan. The time needed to reorganize was estimated to be around 1 month. Thus, by the time the armies were reorganized, the commanders of the 3 countries would have finished their studies in the Martial Lecture Hall, and they would have just enough time to join up with the rest of the army. The 4 armies of the Dragon Stallion Army and the 2 armies of the Imperial Guard made up a total of 420,000 soldiers. This would be all the soldiers that would be sent to conquer the city of Yunnan. After the 3rd Army of the Leopard Army was reorganized, they would set out for the Withering Stronghold. In the end, the armies would disperse, and the defense of Southridge Province would be handed over to the Brave Tiger Army. Only the Southridge War Zone that had been set up previously would be worthy of its name. According to Sun Bin, the commander of the Brave Tiger Army, the headquarters of the war zone would be set up in Shaozhou County. The 1st and 2nd armies of the Brave Tiger Army would be stationed in Shaozhou County. The 3rd Army led by Fan Lihua would be stationed in Chaozhou County. Ouyang Shua still felt that there was a need to station a field army on the border of South Min Province. As for what the dragon-seeking acupuncture point would do once they learned of it, Ouyang Shua did not care. Ouyang Shua would not be lenient in the slightest when it came to defensive measures. The other counties of Southridge Province would be handed over to the local guard divisions, and no field army would be stationed there. The Brave Tiger Army's main area of defense would be the city of South Xiangnan to the north. As for the city of North Xiangnan's neighbor, the city of North Xiangnan, it would be the responsibility of the Leopard Army. As the Dragon Stallion Army moved, the Leopard Army would be responsible for the defense of the entire Southridge Province. In truth, they only needed to defend the north. To the east of Southridge Province was the Southridge Province, and to the west was the Yunnan Province, so there was no need to worry. To the south, Zhili County was guarded by the City Guard Corps and the Imperial Guard Corps, so there was no need to worry. At the same time, the establishment of the Southridge War Zone was only natural. To the Leopard Army, their most important mission was to recapture Southridge County as soon as possible. At that time, the army would no longer need to hole up in the Withering Stronghold. They could collectively move to Southridge County. Southridge County's vast border bordered both the North Sichuan Province and the South Xiangnan Province. Thus, even if they only needed to defend one side, it would not be easy for the Leopard Army. As for how to take Southridge County, the General Administration of Military Affairs had already made a comprehensive plan. Based on the time that had passed, Han Xin was probably already making his move. With the conclusion of the Battle of Southridge, the headquarters of the Dragon Stallion Army led by Bai Qi would be moved to Lingxi City. At the same time, the General Administration of Military Affairs would establish the Yunnan War Zone ahead of time. The War Zone Commander and the Dragon Stallion Army headquarters would be two sides of the same coin. Bai Qi would be appointed as the commander of the Yunnan War Zone, also known as the Yunnan Commander. Similarly, Sun Bin would be appointed as the Southridge Commander, while Han Xin would be appointed as the Southridge Commander. The three divine generals would each be responsible for a war zone, commanding a field army and managing the garrison divisions of the various counties in the war zone. At the same time, Hua Tsubing would be officially appointed as the commander of the Imperial Guard. Using this opportunity, Ouyang Shuo would officially fix the title of the commander of the Shanhai Army to the position of commander. Henceforth, the commander would be the highest position a general of Shanhai City could reach. The four commanders would be second only to Ouyang Shuo, and they were truly the four heavyweights of the army. In the future, when the time was right, Ouyang Shuo planned to establish a military organization of a higher level than the General Administration of Military Affairs, similar to the Military Council or the Grand Council. This organization would transcend the boundaries of the Army and Navy, as well as the territorial boundaries of the war zones. It would become the highest military authority of Shanhai City, responsible for the highest level of military affairs. There was no doubt that the commanders of the army would be permanent members of this organization. After the military conference concluded, Ouyang Shuo began to truly get busy. As the supreme ruler of Shanhai City, there were some responsibilities that Ouyang Shuo had to bear. For example, he had to meet the surrendered generals of the Allied forces and accept their allegiance. The surrendered generals here did not only refer to Feng Yi, who had been appointed as the commander of the army, but also the 5 generals who had been confirmed to be promoted to division commanders. In addition, Ouyang Shuo also had to meet the generals with potential recommended by Hua Tsubing and the other generals. He had to inspect and question them one by one, so that he would have a good idea of what was going on. Ouyang Shuo had to meet them at least once, so that the generals could get to know him and leave an impression. In addition, Ouyang Shuo had to personally inspect the surrendered troops, visit every camp of the prisoners of war, convey the territory's condolences, solve their problems, and boost their morale. If not, how could Ouyang Shuo make the reorganized army completely loyal to him? Subjectively, none of the generals had thought of turning the army under their command into their own private army. But objectively, if Ouyang Shuo did not constantly remind the soldiers and show his presence, there would be all sorts of hidden dangers. After commanding the army for 3 years, Ouyang Shuo deeply agreed with this. In addition to strengthening his control over the army, Ouyang Shuo also had to travel all over the 3 counties and inspect every city. At the very least, he had to visit all the major cities. If he did not do this, he would not be able to appease the people, let alone the various local forces. Although the wilderness was not like reality, the situation was still complicated. If Shanhai City wanted to take over the 3 counties in a short period of time without any twists and turns, Ouyang Shuo had to be at the forefront. His appearance as the Lord often had a greater symbolic meaning. Ouyang Shuo's role was not something that the various prefectural governors and officials could replace. In this way, Ouyang Shuo would have to stay in Lingnan province for at least a month. This month would be Ouyang Shuo's busiest month. Just the number of people he had to meet and the banquets he had to attend were countless. At the same time, it was also to give the territory some breathing room. Chapter 745. Yunnan Province Alliance Headquarters. The lightning-fast fall of Lingnan City made Qin Fun and the others regret it. Especially when they learned that the 2 legions of Shanhai City that had evacuated from the Yunnan battlefield had already set off and were on their way back to Yunnan, they regretted it even more. If we had known this would happen, we would have gone to support them even if it meant risking our lives. The sky above Yunnan was covered with dark clouds. Qin Fun and the others originally hoped that Lingnan City and Shanghai City would fight until both sides suffered heavy losses. At the very least, they would destroy 2 or 3 of Shanghai City's legions. If that happened, Shanghai City would not have the strength to attack Yunnan City again. This would buy them some precious time to expand their army once again. It had to be said that their plan was not bad. Who would have thought that Lingnan City would be so weak? A lord complained in his heart, "They're too weak." In the end, not only did Lingnan City not cause any trouble for Shanghai City, but it also sent a wave of people to Shanghai City. Shanghai City's army did not decrease but increased by 3 more legions. This was too embarrassing. If you ask me, south of Rosy Clouds is too cowardly. The army has already reached the border, but they retreated before the battle even started. They're too spineless, a bunch of trash. A lord began to complain about his allies. It really didn't make sense to say that. At the very least, south of Rosy Clouds sent reinforcements, but they were really just watching from the sidelines. At the end of the day, they were pointing fingers at the other party. It was really like a thief crying thief. The lords were only doing this to vent the extreme uneasiness in their hearts. The fall of Lingnan City had a huge impact on them, and they were somewhat caught off guard. They suddenly felt as if they had no anchor in their hearts, and they were all panicking. They were afraid that when they woke up, they would become the next batch of prisoners. What should we do? A huge problem was placed in front of the lords. Fan Lihua used a single army to defend against the attack of 250,000 allied soldiers and 100,000 enemies. This bloody result of the battle made the lords of Yunnan City truly realize the gap between their troops and Shanghai City's army. They're not on the same level at all. A lord lamented. A chasm, a huge chasm. The alliance wasn't just weak in terms of individual strength, but also in terms of leadership. In the Battle of Baishar City, Fan Lihua's artistic command and dispatch, including the arrangements before the battle, played a decisive role in it. She was worthy of the title of Emperor-level general. Thinking back, the suzerains felt even more terrified. Because the one they were about to face was a divine general, the god of slaughter, Bai Qi. Even among divine generals, Bai Qi was one of the best. In the wilderness, Bai Qi continued his undefeatable legend, and was truly the #1 war god of Shanghai City. Bai Qi's dragon stallion army was the strongest army in Shanghai City, and they were even more ferocious than the stalwart tiger army. Thinking of this, the future of Yunnan city-state became bleaker. The situation was very obvious. They were unable to stop this wave of attacks from Shanghai City by themselves. Temporarily expanding the army was of no help at all. The newly recruited recruits had not gone through training, had not been on the battlefield, and had not seen blood. Not only were they useless, but they would also lower the average standard of the entire army. What was even more frightening was that if they recruited a group of rookies, they would suddenly lose control and flee in the middle of the battle. That would be embarrassing. At that time, the entire army would be dragged into the abyss. Just thinking about it made one's scalp go numb. This was also why Shanghai City liked to take in prisoners of war on a large scale. No matter how bad a prisoner of war was, at least they had seen blood and were no longer recruits on the battlefield. Just this point alone made them several times better than recruit. The drawbacks of a city-state were completely exposed in this aspect. In order to fight against the giants of the wilderness, they gathered the strength of the province and formed a city-state together. This naturally avoided internal friction and could unite against external enemies. At the same time, it also prevented wars between the territories. Without war, the territorial soldiers could not be tempered and could not grow. The defeat of the alliance in the Battle of Baishar City could not be said to have nothing to do with this. There was not much problem with Feng Yi's command. It was just that the alliance did not have enough vigor and tenacity, so they were unable to launch an imposing attack. This was why the Fanlihua Corps had been able to hold out for an entire day. If the attacking side had been the Dragon Stallion army, the result would have been rewritten. This logic was also applicable to the Yunnan city-state, and it was even more cruel. Because the Yunnan province was rugged and the territories were far from each other, the alliance's combat experience was close to zero. On the contrary, every unit of Shanghai City had been tempered by blood and fire. As for the Dragon Stallion army, they were the oldest unit of Shanghai City and had the most combat experience. There was basically no comparison between the two. The future is bleak, and the road ahead is cut off. The lords felt despair and couldn't help but lament. Who can save the city-state? Qin Fun gave the answer, saying sorrowfully, in the entire China region, the only one that can save us is the Yan-Huang alliance. No one else has the courage to fight against Shanghai City. South of Rosy Cloud's cold retreat caused Qin Fun to automatically exclude the South Xiangnan city-state. As for the North Sichuan city-state, there was no hope for them. Right now, only the Yan-Huang alliance had enough motivation to interfere in the Yunnan War. Di Chen and the others didn't interfere in the Lingnan War. Will they help us? A lord questioned Qin Fun's judgment. It was no wonder. The Yan-Huang alliance's disappearance from the Lingnan battlefield was very surprising. There had long been news that the Yan-Huang alliance was going to attack Shanghai City in the Lingnan battlefield, but it turned out to be empty talk. Qin Fun, on the other hand, knew more and said with a bitter smile, "It's not that the Yan-Huang alliance doesn't want to interfere, but before they could make any preparations, the battle took a decisive turn." So Di Chen and the others are really willing to send troops to help us? When the other lords heard this, a glimmer of hope flashed in their eyes. They were like a group of drowning people, not letting go of any straw that could save them. That's right, there's no such thing as a free lunch in this world. The lords weren't stupid. Qin Fun, on the other hand, was calm. Think about it, if we lose, Shanghai City will occupy 3 provinces, and its territory will be 3 times that of Dichen and the others. At that time, will they still be able to move Shanghai City? You mean that the Battle of Yunnan is the Yan-Huang alliance's last chance to attack Shanghai City? Some of the lords began to recover, and their eyes became brighter and brighter. That's the logic. On this matter, both of us have the same request. Qin Fun nodded. It will take some time for the Shanghai City army to reach Yunnan. This time difference is our last chance. We must reach an agreement with the Yan-Huang alliance in the shortest time possible and make arrangements in advance. Qin Fun's words had a hidden meaning. The Lingnan city-state was defeated, of course, because of the difference in strength. Apart from that, there was another factor that could not be ignored, and played a decisive role in the dark. That was, Shanghai City launched a large-scale surprise attack. Shanghai City used the Yunnan city-state as a pretense to create a diversion, and caught the Lingnan city-state off guard, deceiving everyone. Before the war, the Lingnan city-state was not fully prepared for the war at all. Not only the Lingnan city-state, but even the allies like the Xiangnan city-state, Xiongba Dichen, and the other troublemakers did not realize this. When the war broke out, they only started to prepare in a hurry, but it was already too late. Because of this, Xiongba and the others felt regretful. In comparison, Shanghai City could be said to be scheming, and they had considered all aspects. Their tactics had even been deducing since half a year ago. If that was the case, how could they not win? The various weapons carried by Fanlihua's army was a clear proof. Without the tactical arrangements in advance, how could Fanlihua so decisively build such an unusual camp? The following Battle of Yunnan was obviously different. Shanghai City would not be so stupid as to play the same tactic again, and it would not work. Not to mention the Yunnan city-state, even the Xiangnan city-state and the Chuanbei city-state would increase their vigilance after this shock, and they would not give Shanghai City a chance to attack. It was reported that the south of Rosy Clouds had already proposed in the joint conference that within half a year, the Alliance army would expand to 250,000 soldiers, and all of them would be stationed in the southern part of the province, and they would be locked in a stalemate with the brave Tiger Army. The Chuanbei city-state would probably do something similar. The strong expansion of Shanghai City had forced its neighbors to go down the path of militarism. There was a rumor that the result of the Battle of Lingnan had even alarmed the person in Chengdu. Feng Qingyang of the Swordsman City had been frequently appearing in Chengdu recently, and it seemed to be pointing at something. Some people speculated that the two giants of Sichuan might be heading toward the path of cooperation. Unlike Qin Huang and Han Wu, Liu Bei seemed to be more ambitious, or rather, more restless. There was an irreconcilable hatred between Liu Bei and Shanghai City. Therefore, Liu Bei did not want to live in seclusion in the palace, and he was even more unwilling to limit his influence to Chengdu County. Some people speculated that Liu Bei might want to reoccupy Sichuan. However, the largest lord of Sichuan, Feng Qingyang, had no interest in hegemony, and only wanted to be the leader of the martial arts world. As a result, there was no fundamental conflict between the two. It seemed to be a good choice for the two to cooperate and complement each other. However, this matter was too complicated, and it was difficult for outsiders to understand. However, one thing was certain. In the near future, Sichuan would usher in a drastic change. No matter what the change was, it would not be good news for Shanghai City. After all, both of them were enemies of Shanghai City. Therefore, the upcoming battle in Yunnan would be a head-on battle of the century. What are the conditions for the Yan-Huang alliance to send troops? The lords of the cities did not believe that Di Chun and the others would be willing to be Lei Feng. While attacking Shanghai City, they would also seize a certain amount of benefit. This was the style of those aristocratic families. Chapter 746. Lingnan Province, Chaozhou County. An undercurrent surged outside the territory, yet Ouyang Shuo remained motionless, and he continued his patrol in accordance with the prescribed order. During the patrol, he had to deal with the memorials sent by the Southern Protectorate. On this day, Ouyang Shuo and his entourage stopped at Xingning County. There was a nameless courtyard in Xingning County that was guarded by 3,000 divine guards. Not even a fly could get in. The courtyard was guarded by the personal guards, and every corner was monitored. After the Battle of Red Cliffs, the valiant General Su Chu became the captain of the personal guards. Ouyang Shuo expanded the personal guards to 200 people and implemented 2 shifts to protect his safety 24 hours a day. Every personal guard had a unique skill and could fight 10 people at once. Ouyang Shuo would not be capricious when he was traveling. The security work was done to the extreme. Other than the divine guards and the personal guards, the shadow guards also arranged a secret unit to guard him day and night. Before Ouyang Shuo arrived at Chaozhou County, the 3rd Corps of the brave Tiger Army had already combed through the entire county to get rid of any fish that slipped through the net. The entire security work was closely linked, and there was not a single blind spot. In the study, Ouyang Shuo was burning the midnight oil to read the memorials. The endless meetings during the day and the 2 banquets at noon and night did not wear down Ouyang Shuo's willpower. He was full of energy and read the memorials late into the night. The memorials that Ouyang Shuo was holding were from the Department of Agriculture of the administration. After the ocean voyage, Ouyang Shuo successfully exchanged the weaving machine manufacturing technology from William. The No. 7 Research Institute had already begun to tackle the key problems of the weaving machine and would have results by the end of the year. The prosperity of the textile industry in the territory was already in sight. Because of this, Ouyang Shuo also ordered the Department of Agriculture to formulate a detailed silkworm breeding promotion plan while instructing the No. 7 Research Institute to tackle the key problems of the loom technology. Ouyang Shuo's goal was to expand the silkworm breeding, especially the colorful silkworm breeding, to the entire territory. The scale of the plantation would exceed 1 million hectares and the silk output would exceed 10 million units. If not, the future textile industry would not be able to be supported. Ouyang Shuo was very clear that if the loom was used on a large scale, the demand for silk raw materials would be terrifying. He did not want the loom to be mass-produced, but the raw materials could not keep up, which would affect the cloth output. Every industry must connect the upstream and downstream to form a matching industrial chain. Only then would it have a future. The memorial submitted by Sun Yanong, the Director General of Agriculture, indicated that there had been a breakthrough in this matter. Through the mediation of the Department of Agriculture, a plan was finally agreed upon by all parties. The Textile Industry Association would invest 100,000 gold coins, and the General Administration of Finance would allocate 300,000 gold coins as a special fund. In addition, they would borrow 200,000 gold coins from the Bank of the Four Seas in the name of the Department of Agriculture, totaling 600,000 gold coins. They would jointly establish a silkworm breeding support fund to support the farmers in the counties of the territory in silkworm breeding. At the same time, each county would also allocate a certain amount of special support funds from the county's finance. In this way, the core financial problem was finally solved. Ouyang Shuo didn't interfere in this matter, nor did he pay for it himself. Compared to the entire territory, Ouyang Shuo's 6 million gold coins really didn't count for much. If he, the Lord, had to pay for everything, then what was the point of having a bunch of ministers? The territory had its own rules. Setting up a joint fund was a creative solution. The territory's finance, industry associations, local government, and governing bodies all played their respective roles, each performing their own duties and working together. In ancient times, it could be said to be perfect. After Ouyang Shuo finished reading, he wrote at the end of the memorial, "Very good. Implement it accordingly. The establishment of the fund has value as a reference. We can consider extending it to other areas of agriculture. I hope Zhou Xiang will consider it." Closing the memorial, Ouyang Shuo picked up the next one. The memorial was sent by Du Ruhui. It only reported one piece of news. The number 1 general of the Three Kingdoms, Lu Bu, whom Ouyang Shuo had been looking forward to, had finally come to Shanghai City to meet with Diao Chan. There were 2 other people who came with Lu Bu. One was the strategist Chun Gong, and the other was the general Gao Shun. Chun Gong, courtesy name Gongtai, was Lu Bu's chief strategist during the last years of the Eastern Han Dynasty. He was a straightforward and resourceful person. When he was young, he befriended many famous people. In 192 AD, the provincial governor of Yen Province, Lu Dai, died in the battle against the Yellow Turban of Qing Province. Chun Gong and the others advocated for Cao Cao to take over as the governor of Yen Province. However, after Cao Cao killed Bian Rang and other famous people at the end of the Han Dynasty, Chun Gong fell out with Cao Cao. He persuaded Zhang Miao to betray Cao Cao and welcome Lu Bu to Yen Province. He helped Lu Bu attack Cao Cao and took over Yen Province and Su Province. In Xiapi City, Lu Bu did not listen to Chun Gong's plan and failed. After Lu Bu was defeated, he was captured by Cao Cao along with Lu Bu and was determined to die. Even during the Three Kingdoms period, Chun Gong could be considered a top-notch strategist. Unfortunately, Chun Gong was a bit of a hipster. He was too upright. Because he could not stand Cao Cao's cruelty, he always went against Cao Cao. In the end, he chose Lu Bu, an unwise master, and died. In history, Lu Bu's general Gao Shun was also executed along with Lu Bu. Another general under Lu Bu, Zhang Liao, chose to submit to Cao Cao. In the end, he became one of the 5 great generals of Cao Wei. Gao Shun's ability was comparable to Zhang Liao's. If you read the history of the Three Kingdoms carefully, you would find that Gao Shun was a famous general who was buried in history. Gao Shun was simply a perfect soldier. Not only was he fierce and good at fighting, but he was also good at training his soldiers. The troops that he trained were known as the rank-breaking camp. They were an elite troop in the history of the Three Kingdoms. In addition, Gao Shun was also a brave and intelligent general. He was always able to give Lu Bu the right advice at the crucial moment. He was also very methodical in dealing with unexpected situations. In terms of moral character, it was specifically recorded in the chronicles of the heroes of the late Han Dynasty that Gao Shun did not drink alcohol or accept bribes. Gao Shun was also very loyal to Lu Bu. He did not take credit for himself and was not arrogant. Even if he was not put in an important position by Lu Bu and was suspected, he did not complain or complain. In the face of life and death, he chose to sacrifice himself for justice. Regardless of whether his loyalty to Lu Bu was worth it or not, in terms of moral character and morality, Gao Shun was undoubtedly a role model for his contemporaries. Shanghai City did not lack valiant generals. The only thing it lacked was a general like Gao Shun who was good at training soldiers. Not to mention Lu Bu's arrangement, Gao Shun would be able to get a place in Shanghai City and display his expertise in training soldiers. The arrival of Lu Bu, Chun Gong, and Gao Shun was undoubtedly good news. Ouyang Shua commented at the end of the memorial, asking Du Ruhui to make arrangements for the three of them and arrange positions for them when he returned to Shanghai City. Putting down the memorial, Ouyang Shua raised his head and looked outside the window. The bright moon hung high in the night sky. The sky was clear and the air was clear. It was a rare good weather. Looking through the night sky, Ouyang Shua seemed to be able to feel that there was a giant dragon high up in the sky, using the moonlight to breathe. Its aura was continuous and majestic. After the Lingnan War, Shanghai City's territory expanded to 3 counties. The one who benefited the most was the Dragon of Providence. Affected by this, the Dragon of Providence's body expanded once again. Now, the Dragon of Providence was using the moonlight to condense its body. Ouyang Shua could vaguely feel that the purple aura in the Dragon of Providence's body was becoming more and more abundant. This was a sign that the territory was flourishing. Looking away, Ouyang Shua roused himself and continued to read the memorial. The affairs of the territory were complicated. Even with the assistance of the various ministers, Ouyang Shua could not clear his mind. In the wilderness, wars were frequent. Governing by doing nothing was a false proposition. Of course, this was also Ouyang Shua's tempering. The territory grew from a village to a town, from a county to a county, and finally to the edge of the establishment of a nation. While Ouyang Shua witnessed the territory's growth, his personal ability also improved by leaps and bounds. In the real world, Ouyang Shua was now a young talent. The last memorial was submitted by Yingyu. They were all related to the territory's various pillar industries. While the territory's various industries were flourishing, they also encountered their own difficulties and bottlenecks. First was the most profitable industry, the shipbuilding industry. In the 3 years of Gaia, the territory's most dazzling industry was the shipbuilding industry. In terms of glory, it was the prosperity of the shipbuilding industry that laid the foundation for long-distance navigation. It was the foundation that supported the crazy expansion of the Nanyang Navy's 5 major fleet. It could be said that without the prosperity of the shipbuilding industry, there would not be the formation of the 5 major fleets. Naturally, there would not be the heroic image of the Shanghai City Navy sailing the seas and dominating the world. Everything was supported by countless shipbuilders, the heroes behind the scenes. The shipbuilding industry not only brought glory, it also brought crazy profit. According to the statistics of the General Administration of Finance, in just the first half of Gaia's 3rd year, the territory had earned more than 4 million gold coins from the sale of merchant ship. In addition, there was the windfall of warship. The shipbuilding industry had become the backbone of the territory's finances, supporting half of the territory's finances. Even the similar star industry, the military industry, could not be compared to it. It had to be said that the profits from the monopoly were really crazy. Under the windfall, there were also hidden worries. With the opening of the Grand Line, China's demand for merchant ships increased. The territory's major shipyards' orders were already scheduled until the second half of next year. The surge in orders was a happy thing. Inu reported the situation, but it made Ouyang Shuo frown. In the game, the speed of ship construction was accelerated, but the materials needed to build the ship were not scrimped at all. Behind every ship there was a large number of trees being cut down. And the wood used to build the ship had extremely high-quality requirements. Ordinary trees were not good enough. Moreover, different troops had different requirements for wood. A complete warship often involved fir, pine, cypress, teak, elm, redwood, camphor, nanmu, catalpa, cypress, and other kinds of wood. As a result, the forest within the territory had been overcut. The 100,000 mountains, where the Lianzhou Basin and Lingnan Province intersect, had been cut down into wasteland. To this day, the territory was facing a crisis of wood shortage. Chapter 747. Speaking of timber, Southeast Asia's Annam, Siam, Johor, and Java were all rich in timber. Among them, Siam and Johor had business dealings with Shanghai City. Shanghai City even had a large shipyard in Singapore, so it had the geographical advantage. Inu mentioned in the memorial that the Department of Commerce had arranged for a trade negotiation team to go to the two countries to negotiate the timber trade in the near future. If it went well, it would solve the urgent need of the shipbuilding industry. Of course, this was not a long-term solution. Not to mention the high cost of ocean transportation, whether it was Siam or Johor, it was impossible for them to give Shanghai City too much of a discount in the timber trade. The procurement cost was not low either. To put it bluntly, the two countries were just the simplest trading partners. They were not even friends, let alone allies. If there was money to be made, the two countries would not be lenient. In history, the Southeast Asian countries were once colonies of the Western powers and became the raw material base of the Western powers. By widening the price difference between industrial products and raw materials, the Western powers exploited the colonial labor force and seized a large amount of raw materials. The current Shanghai City was obviously unable to do this. The ASEAN in the game was like a powder keg that could explode at any time. Once the war started, the timber trade would be affected, which would affect the territory's shipbuilding industry. Therefore, the safest way was to completely take down one of the countries through a war. Shanghai City's first target was naturally Annam, which they had a conflict with. There would be a war between the two sooner or later. It was just that before the war in Yunnan ended, Shanghai City did not have the energy to start a war. The ASEAN countries were colluding with each other, so they had to consider the whole situation. Once they started a war with Annam, Shanghai City had to be prepared to face the entire ASEAN. Attacking Annam would be a very difficult and systematic war mission. In Gaia's third year, there was no way to put it on the agenda. At the earliest, they would have to wait until Gaia's fourth year. Not to mention the distant war, even the war in Yunnan was not simple. Whether it was the collaboration between Yunnan City-State and Yanhuang Alliance, or the recent expansion of Xiangnan City-State, Ouyang Shuo was well aware of it through the spies planted in the city-states. Ouyang Shuo was not surprised by Yanhuang Alliance's intervention. Ouyang Shuo also wanted to take this opportunity to compete with the Yanhuang Alliance. He wanted to let Di Chen and the others know what it meant to go for wool and come home shorn. No matter what, the Battle of Yunnan would be even more complicated than the Battle of Lingnan. In the memorial, Inu also mentioned another pillar industry of the territory, the steel industry. Just like the shipbuilding industry, the steel industry was also limited by materials, or more accurately, energy. Until now, there had not been a good solution to the demand for coal in the territory's steel industry. Fallen Phoenix City was located inland, so transportation was lacking. Recently, Ouyang Shua had already shifted his focus from Taiyuan province to the northern part of the capital and Ludong province, the two second-class coal-producing regions in the country. Compared to the Taiyuan province where fallen Phoenix City was located, although the coal output of the two places could not be compared, they had a natural advantage. They were both near the sea and had natural ports within their borders. The coastline of the China region was also long. From north to south, there were more than 10 large natural ports, including Binhai Port in the northern part of the capital, Haijin Port in the southern part, Jiaodong Port in Ludong Province, Haizhou Port and Xinqing Port in Donghai Province, Zhoushan Port in Jiangnan Province, Quanzhou Port in Minnan Province, and Jiaozhou Port in Lingnan Province. In comparison, the North Sea port of Shanghai City was nothing. The Binhai Port in the northern part of the capital was located in the territory of Hardstone City. Shanghai City's business department was already negotiating with Hardstone City, preparing to establish a stable coal trading channel through the sea. The premise was that Hardstone City had to increase the amount of coal mining in the territory. Mining coal not only required a large amount of manpower, but also equipment and funds. The Bank of the Four Seas provided a special loan of 500,000 gold coins for Hardstone City to expand their coal production. The guarantor of the loan was Shanghai City's finance department. Before they even received a ship of coal, the finance department had already paid 100,000 gold coins in advance. Cui Yingyu, who was in charge of the territory's industry, had even announced that Shanghai City would buy as much coal as Hardstone City mined. In this way, it was a win-win situation between the two territories. Shanghai City obtained the coal that they urgently needed, while Hardstone City obtained precious development funds by selling the coal. There was a saying that went, "Don't put all your eggs in one basket." Other than Hardstone City, Shanghai City also set their sights on the Ludong province. Compared to Hardstone City, the Ludong province was not only larger, but it was also closer to Shanghai City. Today, the entire Ludong province had been occupied by West Chu. Speaking of which, the relationship between the hegemon of Western Chu, Xiang Yu, and Ouyang Shua was a little complicated. During the Battle of Giant Deer, it was the army of Shanghai City that pushed Xiang Yu into the abyss. However, a hegemon was still a hegemon. Before Xiang Yu committed suicide, he had promised Ouyang Shua that he owed him a favor. Ouyang Shua suddenly realized that it was time to make use of this favor. Thinking of this, Ouyang Shua immediately picked up his pen and sent a letter to Zhang Yi, the Minister of Ceremonies, asking him to arrange a diplomatic group to secretly go to West Chu. It was not only to establish a relationship, but also to open negotiations on the coal trade. The reason why Ouyang Shua took this matter so seriously was naturally not limited to the coal. He also hoped to use this opportunity to dissolve the estrangement between the two forces, and it would be best if they could establish a closer relationship. For example, forming an alliance. Yan Huang Alliance was always playing dirty tricks, which made Ouyang Shua annoyed. It was time to find some fun for them, so that they would not participate in the southern border war. Ouyang Shua had heard that the West Chu regime was very powerful, sweeping through the Ludong province and swallowing the Zhang Chu regime, becoming the overlord of the Central Plains. However, West Chu was not without weaknesses. The biggest weakness of the West Chu regime was that the people were living in poverty and the economy was weak. The hegemon of Western Chu, Xiang Yu, wanted to expand, but he was limited by his financial resources, so he had to give up halfway. As such, Ouyang Shua did not mind giving him a hand. Ouyang Shua believed that Xiang Yu would be very interested in the goodwill of Shanghai City. West Chu maintained a strong position in the Central Plains, threatening Di Chen's capital city in the north, and War Wolf's East Sea province in the south. It was an important existence. With such a regime, Di Chen and War Wolf would not be able to run around. Other than the West Chu regime, Ouyang Shuo also instructed the Chamberlain of Dependencies, with the cooperation of the Shanghai Guards, to make more contact with the aristocratic families in the Huanan province. Maintaining a chaotic Huanan province was the most in line with Shanghai City's interests. The same logic was also applicable to the complicated Central Plains province. Without a doubt, with the rise of the Chamberlain of Dependencies, Shanghai City would use diplomatic means to realize their interests, to balance their enemies, and to make friends. Sun Tzu said, "The first is to attack the enemy, the second is to attack the enemy, the third is to attack the enemy, and the last is to attack the city." It could be foreseen that Shanghai City's path of attacking the enemy would become more and more important in the future. By the time Ouyang Shuo finished writing the secret letter, it was already late at night and all was silent. The stacks of memorials on the table had all been read, and at the end of each one was Ouyang Shuo's handwriting. The next morning, these memorials would be sent back to the Southern Border Protectorate. Ouyang Shuo put down his brush, leaned his hands back, cracked his neck, and stretched his body. Suddenly, his body let out a crackling sound. It could be seen that he had been sitting for too long. Although it was hard, Ouyang Shuo felt very fulfilled. Seeing his territory becoming stronger step by step under his guidance, this sense of accomplishment could not be compared to anything. After leaving the study and returning to his bedroom, Ouyang Shuo began to cultivate as usual. As the Yellow Emperor's internal scripture broke through to the 11th level, the golden true yuan in Ouyang Shuo's body was like a surging river, surging violently. One could see how powerful the true yuan was. The dantian of his abdomen had already expanded into a golden spring. The golden true yuan was like spring water, rolling up and down in the mouth of the spring. It was a spectacular sight. After the fortuitous encounter on the Dragon Island, the meridians in his body had become extremely tough. Under the continuous erosion of the golden true yuan, they even had a faint golden luster. Even the bones in his body had started to be dyed golden. According to the records of the Yellow Emperor's internal scripture, once the meridians in the body turned golden, it was the sign of reaching the 11th level. After reaching the 12th level, all the bones in the body would turn golden. Unfortunately, it had been more than 5 months since the Yellow Emperor's internal scripture broke through to the 11th level. Ouyang Shuo cultivated day and night, but the progress was still slow. According to the current progress, he didn't know how long it would take for him to break through to the 11th level. Even so, Ouyang Shuo didn't have a trace of impatience. He cultivated step by step every day. He believed that the little bit of accumulation would eventually lead to success. Cultivation was originally about cultivating the mind. One had to be able to endure the loneliness, but also be able to keep calm and endure the torment. Since he started cultivating the Yellow Emperor's internal scripture, the first 10 levels had been smooth sailing. He either had the help of natural treasures or had a fortuitous encounter. Now that he had reached this step, it was time for him to temper himself. Hence Ouyang Shuo wasn't anxious at all. To Ouyang Shuo, daily cultivation was a kind of enjoyment in itself. The next morning, Ouyang Shuo began to pack his luggage and prepared to rush to the next county. At this moment, a guard came to report, "Lord, there is a strange woman outside the courtyard requesting to see you. She said she has something to report." Strange woman? Ouyang Shuo frowned. According to the rules of the wilderness, after a territory falls, the players living in the territory would be teleported to the capital. Hence, along the way, Ouyang Shuo rarely saw players. Needless to say, there would be players who would take the initiative to look for him. At Ouyang Shuo's position, there weren't many players who could talk to him directly. Ouyang Shuo asked, "What's the woman's name?" Chapter 748. "My lord, she calls herself Wu Qingqing," the guard answered. Wu Qingqing. Ouyang Shuo's eyes narrowed. China's players were no strangers to Wu Qingqing. Among the top 10 beauties in China, Wu Qingqing was ranked 5th. It was said that she was devastatingly beautiful. In reality, Wu Qingqing was a superstar, a top movie star that was famous throughout the world. What was even rarer was that not only could Wu Qingqing act in movies, she was also a famous director and had her own studio. In the game, this superstar lost her usefulness and gradually faded from the sight of players. The only thing people remembered about her was her peerless look. It was because she was not prominent in the game that Wu Qingqing's ranking was not high. In terms of appearance alone, Wu Qingqing could definitely be ranked in the top 3. She was on par with Feng Qiuhuang and peerless elegance. Ouyang Shuo, who had been reborn, had a different impression of Wu Qingqing. Ouyang Shuo clearly remembered that in the 4th year of Gaia, Wu Qingqing had made her first in-game movie, Country and Beauty. It instantly became popular throughout the country and the number of paid viewers on the forums exceeded 20 million. All the scenes in Country and Beauty were shot in-game. It was beautiful and did not require any post-production. The actors were all professional gamers and they were all in action. There was no need for stunt doubles or special effects. Even the costumes and props were real in-game equipment or custom-made by top professional gamers. It was exquisite and had a strong visual impact. The filming equipment was specially requested by Wu Qingqing from Gaia. It was a highly intelligent camera elf that was better than the filming equipment in real life. Together with the excellent script and excellent editing, it was impossible for Country and Beauty not to become popular. Of course, the most important factor was Gaia's support. Other than the exclusive camera elf, Gaia had opened a new viewing section on the forums. In this section, players would be placed in an exclusive virtual space after paying. They would enjoy a 5D viewing experience that was similar to virtual reality. It was even better than the cinema in real life. Gaia's actions were not specifically targeting Wu Qingqing. Their true goal was to use this as an opportunity to enrich the entertainment lives of gamers. After all, gamers around the world had to live in the game for 10 years. It would be unimaginable if they did not have entertainment. Wu Qingqing's appearance was coincidental. Before filming, Wu Qingqing was probably very nervous. She never imagined that it would become so popular. Even if it was a movie made in the game, the cost was not really zero. Hiring more than a dozen main actors, thousands of extras, and manufacturing thousands of costumes and props had cost 600,000 to 700,000 gold coins. The filming cost of the entire movie was around 1 million gold coins. Wu Qingqing's risk had finally paid off. With just this one movie, Wu Qingqing earned millions of gold coins. She even made it to the top of China's celebrity rankings. Her fame was boundless. The popularity of The Beauty of the Country and Country was the prelude to the rise of the gaming and entertainment industry. In the second half of the 4th year of Gaia, the entire game and movie industry experienced a boom. The scale of the industry exceeded 10 million gold coins. It could be said that this was an unexplored blue sea. Looking at the time, The Beauty of Country and Country should be in the middle of filming. Thinking of this, the corners of Ouyang Shuo's mouth curled into a smile. He had roughly guessed why Wu Qingqing would appear in Xingning County and why she would anxiously look for him. "Ask her to wait in the side hall," Ouyang Shuo instructed. "Yes, sir." In the side hall, Wu Qingqing held a cup of tea and frowned. Deep down, Wu Qingqing was a very prideful person. The arrival of the apocalypse, interstellar migration, virtual games, and a series of sudden changes had completely disrupted the rhythm of her life. When she entered the game, Wu Qingqing suddenly realized that she had nothing to do. In the game, she was no longer a celebrity who attracted attention. She was mediocre. The real celebrities in the game were top-notch professional gamers or lords of the wilderness. A celebrity in real life, no matter how beautiful she was, would not be interested in her. Before entering On the Earth, Wu Qingqing had never played any games. In her memory, other than work, there was only work. Every move she made was under the spotlight. After 2 years of silence, Wu Qingqing could no longer hold it in. She wanted to do something, and the only thing she was good at was making movies. When Gaia activated the time limit for the exchange of achievement points, Wu Qingqing gritted her teeth and exchanged a large amount of achievement points for game gold coins. She raised a total of 500,000 gold coins. As a top-notch movie star, Wu Qingqing's achievement points were not low, but they were definitely not high either. With this exchange, there was no turning back. Following that, Wu Qingqing began to gather the studio members in real life and rebuilt Qingqing Studio in the game. She began to write the script and plan the possibility of making a movie in the game. However, the early stages were not smooth. Most of the studio members did not believe that making a movie in the game could make money, so they all rejected Wu Qingqing's request. Even so, Wu Qingqing gritted her teeth and persevered. The rise of electronic newspapers in the game had truly allowed Wu Qingqing to see the light of hope. Finally, with the introduction of a real-life friend, Wu Qingqing and the Lord of Xingning County reached an agreement to invest in Country and Beauty. Xingning County invested 100,000 gold coins and provided the filming location. Other than that, Xingning County also provided assistance in terms of weapons, equipment, skills, and talent. Without these, the movie could not even be started. Stumbling about, everything was ready, and the movie finally started shooting. Unexpectedly, disaster suddenly fell from the sky. In less than a month, Xingning County was captured by Shanghai City. The Lord of Xingning County was teleported to the capital and could not fulfill his promise. The entire movie was put on hold. Wu Qingqing felt despair. Especially during the war, the entire production team was almost destroyed by the Shanghai City Army. After the war ended, they were constantly being interrogated. It was almost impossible to restart the filming of the movie. The previous investment was about to go down the drain, and the actors that they had painstakingly hired all terminated their contract. The production team was about to be dismissed. At this moment, there was unexpected news of He Yu Wui patrolling Chaozhou County. Wu Qingqing was like a drowning person who saw a glimmer of hope in the midst of despair. That was why she paid him a visit today. She did not know what effect today's conversation would have. Half an hour later, Ouyang Shua arrived at the side hall. "Lord Wui, I've heard so much about you." For some reason, when she saw the young man walking slowly into the hall, Wu Qingqing felt an inexplicable sense of nervousness. The man in front of her was about the same age as her. His face was chiseled and handsome, but his expression was indifferent. It was neither warm nor unapproachable. There was not a trace of aggressive aura on him. For some reason, Wu Qingqing felt flustered. In real life, Wu Qingqing was an international superstar. She had seen all kinds of situations, but at this moment she lost her sense of propriety. The man in front of her was like an unfathomable ocean. Even the big shots in real life did not give Wu Qingqing such a strong sense of oppression. Wu Qingqing felt more and more uncertain. "Miss Qingqing, I've long heard of your great name. I'm a loyal fan of yours." Ouyang Shua lightly smiled and sat down on the seat of honor. "Is that so?" Wu Qingqing's eyes lit up, but her expression turned gloomy. "Unfortunately, I'm already past my prime." As a top-notch actress, Wu Qingqing was good at grasping the tiniest of expressions. Every frown and smile was enough to make one's heart flutter. Ouyang Shua was unmoved. He smiled and said, "How is it past my prime? In my opinion, the movie industry has great potential in the game industry." Time was precious. Ouyang Shua did not want to beat around the bush, and went straight to the point. "Do you really think so?" Wu Qingqing was really surprised. This was the first time that someone had the same opinion as her. Even the previous lord of Xingning County had only agreed to it because he coveted her beauty and had ulterior motive. During the filming, Wu Qingqing was harassed quite a bit. Even so, Wu Qingqing did not give up. She defused the other party's attacks while speeding up the filming. Such professionalism was commendable. Of course. Ouyang Shua nodded. Wu Qingqing glanced at him. Seeing that he did not seem to be lying, she gradually became more confident. She also knew that a man of his status would not stoop to lying. Using this as an excuse, Wu Qingqing told him all the difficulties she had encountered. You want Shanghai City to take over? Ouyang Shua asked. Wu Qingqing nodded. If we can reshoot the movie, I'm willing to give up another 10% of the profits. As she spoke, she passed the cooperation agreement she had signed with the Lord of Xingning County to Ouyang Shua. The agreement she had signed with the Lord of Xingning County was a 60-40 split. Giving up 10% of the profits meant that the profit would be square. For this movie, Wu Qingqing had invested 500,000 gold coins. If the profits did not reach her expectations, she would go bankrupt. Giving up 10% of the profits required a lot of determination and sincerity. Ouyang Shua took the agreement and skimmed through it. How is it? Wu Qingqing was a little nervous. Ouyang Shua shook his head. This is already the biggest concession I can make. Wu Qingqing frowned and her face gradually turned pale. She did not expect the other party to be such a greedy person. He had forced her to the edge of the cliff. Ouyang Shua smiled as if he had seen through Wu Qingqing's thoughts. He said, I think you misunderstood. What do you mean? Shanghai City has occupied Xingning County. As the Lord, you have the responsibility to defend your territory. Naturally, you will accept all the old debt. The agreement you signed with Xingning County will be carried out in its entirety. Really? Wu Qingqing was overjoyed. Ouyang Shua smiled and said nothing. Thank you so much. Wu Qingqing stood up excitedly and wanted to shake his hand to express her gratitude. Seeing that he had no intention of doing so, she awkwardly sat back down. She could not hide the excitement on her face. It was not that Ouyang Shua was arrogant, but he was used to the etiquette in reality. Shake hands? No one dared to do that to him. Ouyang Shua smiled and dissolved the awkwardness. He asked, I have a suggestion. I wonder if you are interested? Chapter 749. What is it? I'm all ears. Wu Qingqing immediately relaxed after resolving the biggest problem, and she started to laugh and talk. Ouyang Shua asked, I'm very optimistic about the video game industry and would like to find a professional to cooperate with. Are you interested? Ouyang Shua had no reason to let go of the video game industry. How could investing in a movie satisfy his appetite? His goal was to develop the entertainment industry and become a big shot in the entertainment industry. Glamorous Studio was the first target that Ouyang Shua had set his eyes on. Wu Qingqing's eyes were filled with wariness. You want to buy my studio? Wu Qingqing was no stranger to mergers and acquisitions in real life. Now that the other party held the lifeline of country and beauty, it was hard to reject. Glamorous Studio was Wu Qingqing's lifeline. She would not allow anyone to touch it, not even Shanghai City. Wu Qingqing had already made up her mind to fail. It's not a takeover. Ouyang Shua shook his head. It's a capital injection. I want to inject 200,000 gold coins into Glamorous Studio in my own name. I want 40% of the shares and I won't interfere with the studio's operations. Shanghai City would also be able to provide support in various aspects when it came to filming. Not to mention, the Bank of the Four Seas is more than happy to provide a loan for Glamorous Studio's next movie. How about it, are you interested? Ouyang Shua's conditions were not harsh. He knew how to achieve a win-win situation and only wanted to make the cake bigger. He didn't want to reap short-term profits before the peach was ripe. Wu Qingqing's heart thumped when she heard that. She realized that a huge opportunity was right in front of her. Even in the video game industry, the movie industry was a money-burning industry. Wu Qingqing couldn't afford a single movie even if she invested all her money. She needed to find a partner. If Country and Beauty couldn't recover its capital, Glamorous Studio would declare bankruptcy. Therefore, the best way was to find a big shot to cooperate with. Without a doubt, Shanghai City was the biggest player in the China region. Shanghai City was not only the biggest shareholder of the Bank of the Four Seas, but they were also very powerful. More importantly, they could provide all the necessary facilities for filming. Most importantly, they weren't greedy. They didn't try to control the studio and promised not to interfere with the studio's operations. Clearly, this was purely an investment. In the wilderness, there was no better partner than Shanghai City. In the past, Wu Qingqing had fantasized about cooperating with Shanghai City, but unfortunately, she couldn't even enter the royal city. If it wasn't for the fact that Ouyang Shua's image in the outside world was that he didn't care about women and had even cruelly rejected the love of Feng Qiuhuang, Bai Hua, and the other top goddesses, Wu Qingqing would have really thought that he had some ulterior motives towards her. I agree. Wu Qingqing nodded without hesitation. Even if there was a huge pit in front of her, she still had to jump in. The opportunity is fleeting. Wu Qingqing was a decisive woman. Straightforward. Ouyang Shua nodded. That's all for today. Someone will contact you later. Ouyang Shua had no intention of personally managing the entertainment industry. He wanted to hand it over to Song Jia. Apart from investing in City Toppling Studio, Ouyang Shua would also take out another 800,000 gold coins to recruit more big shots in the entertainment industry. A one-time investment amounted to 1 million gold coins. In this way, the funds in Ouyang Shua's possession shrank once more, and he was only left with 5 million gold coins. But if he really wanted to operate the entertainment industry, 1 million gold coins seemed somewhat insignificant. In order to not use up too much liquidity, the best way was to proceed step by step. He would first invest in 2 or 3 movies, and then use the profits to expand the scale of the business. The matters in the middle were complicated. Ouyang Shua believed that with Song Jia's ability, she would definitely be able to handle it well. After Wu Qingqing left, Ouyang Shua sent a letter to Song Jia, explaining the matter in detail. At the same time, he also transferred 1 million gold coins to Song Jia. From now on, Song Jia would take over the matters of following the filming of Beauty of the Country and Rivers and investing in City Toppling Studio. Ouyang Shua was looking forward to an unimaginable entertainment industry that would completely explode in the next 2 years, bringing in a huge amount of cash for Shanghai City. After the interlude, Ouyang Shua and his group set off again. And just as Ouyang Shua was pacifying the 3 counties of Lingnan, the dormant leopard army finally made a move. October 20th, South Sichuan Province's Guilin County, Xuanwu Pass. A year ago, the city-state of northern Sichuan and the city-state of Xiangnan joined hands. While the army of Shanghai City was stalled by the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom, they brazenly dispatched their troops and occupied Guilin County. Guilin County was the northern barrier of South Sichuan Province, and also the northern barrier. Its strategic location was extremely important. The only passageways connecting the south were Guiping Pass and Xuanwu Pass. In the battle to defend the pass, Guiping Pass was eventually defended by Shanghai City's army. Later, it was expanded into the Withered Fortress and became the headquarters of the Leopard Army. The other pass, Xuanwu Pass, was unfortunately occupied by the Allied forces until now. Today, Xuanwu Pass had been impregnated by the Allied forces, and on this day, Anbei General Zhang Han led the Second Corps of the Leopard Army and slowly approached the fortress. The Leopard Army was responsible for guarding the northern border, and its commander, Han Xian, personally led the First Corps to guard the Withered Fortress. The Second Corps led by Zhang Han set up a permanent camp near Xuanwu Pass to monitor the Allied forces. During the year of confrontation, the Second Corps and the Xuanwu Pass had constant conflicts and friction. Unfortunately, Xuanwu Pass was an impregnable pass guarded by 50,000 Allied forces, making it difficult for them to take it down. As such, the Allied forces at the pass remained unmoved even when they saw the Second Corps of Shanghai City launching another attack. It wasn't surprising that the other party would launch such an operation once a month. "Look, they're here again. Ha, a bunch of fools. They're asking for it." The Allied forces on the walls of the pass mocked the Allied forces. At the center of the Second Corps, Zhang Han was riding on a horse, staring at the pass not too far away with a complicated expression. It had been a year. The Second Corps had endured for an entire year. "It's finally time to end this," Zhang Han muttered to himself. With a wave of Zhang Han's flag, the Central Army slowly retreated, revealing 32 elite steeds pulling 8 cold cannons at the forefront of the formation. These cannons weren't cannons of the Ming Dynasty, but a modified version of the 7th Research Institute, codenamed P1. Compared to the cumbersome cannons of the Ming Dynasty, the P1 cannon had been greatly improved. Most importantly, the barrel, frame, and other components had been replaced with cast iron. Not only did this greatly reduce the chances of the cannons exploding, it also reduced the weight of the cannons by 50%. The problem with the high industrialization rate was the low conformity rate of the P1 cannons, resulting in a severe shortage of production capacity. Currently, they could only produce a dozen or so P1 cannons that met the requirements every month. The main problem was that the industrialization of the territory had only just begun, and the technological level was still too low. Most of the components couldn't be machined, so they had to be polished manually. Not only was it time-consuming, but the precision wasn't high either. The second change was the resetting of the frame system. The Ming Dynasty cannons were made of two-wheeled carts, making it inconvenient to transport them. For this reason, the 7th Research Institute specially combined the latest industrialization results to create an all-steel four-wheeled carriage for the P1 cannon. The wheels of the carriage were also specially designed, making them twice as wide as normal wheels. At the same time, they were equipped with a gear system. With 4 steeds, they could easily move a cannon, greatly increasing the mobility of the cannon. Of course, due to the lack of rubber tires, the carriage still had its flaws. Not only could it not keep up with the steeds, but it could also easily get bogged down in rainy weather and muddy road. Moreover, they were on the main road. If they were marching in the wilderness, it would be even worse. They wouldn't even be able to cross a small hill or a ditch, let alone a mountain or a swamp. To transport the 8 cannons from Shanghai City to the 2nd Division's camp, the combat department took a full month, and they suffered a lot along the way. Once the cannons got bogged down, it was almost impossible to drag them out. There were a total of 12 cannons transported from Shanghai City, but only 8 reached the front line. The remaining 4 were scrapped during the transport. Because of this, the P1 cannon didn't even have a chance to be used in the Battle of Lingnan. The third change was the essence of the P1 cannon. After Liu Mo and the others' research, combining the advantages of the Spanish and British cannons, the P1 cannon finally achieved projectile firing, achieving a historic breakthrough. This way, not only did it increase the range of the cannon, but it also made it possible to bombard the top of the city, or even inside the city. Cannons were no longer useless for sieging a city, they could only bombard the city gate. The P1 cannon was more of a siege weapon, and its first target was Xianwu Pass. At the same time, in order to complement the projectile firing, the P1 cannon was also equipped with a special aiming device, greatly increasing the accuracy of the cannon. It was no longer dependent on the experience of the gunner. In order to calibrate the aiming device that matched the P1 cannon, the 7th Research Institute conducted thousands of bombardment tests outside the city, collecting the original orbital data bit by bit, before the final product was completed. The 3 changes mentioned above were only the P1 cannon, which was the biggest improvement compared to the Frang machine cannon of the Ming Dynasty. There were more than 20 other small modifications, each of which was the blood and sweat of the researchers. As the Atlantis mimic aircraft manufacturing technology was slowly digested by the 7th Research Institute, coupled with the help of Industrial Revolution products such as steam engines and textile machines, the territory's industrialization level was expected to reach a new level by the end of the year. By then, the 7th Research Institute would start the research on the P2 cannon. It was conceivable that the P2 cannon would be the real killing machine, and it might even change the way of war, truly introducing firearms into cold weapons, and play a decisive role. The current P1 cannon was just a small test. Even so, it was more than enough to give Xian Wu Pass a hard time. With the help of this cannon, Zhang Han was confident that he would be able to take down the pass within a day and wash away his previous humiliation. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.